that are such in a particular lifestyle that it ended up, like if you're born a lion, then definitely you'd have lots of anger, wouldn't you? So it depends on the life here. But I mean, if you're living in vows, that's why if we've got a good life now and good tendencies now, that's why we live in vows, we strengthen them hugely. I'll talk about vows. You just get ahead of the game. It can't come from nowhere. So if it does happen, it doesn't come from nowhere. It's just that, you know, negative seeds were, at the time of your death, you had a bad death, and negative seeds were stronger than the positive ones. Because we've got trillions of seeds in there. We've got seeds of every imaginable type of life until we've purified all of them. You know? Do you understand? Yeah. I mean, until we've realised emptiness, there's no certainty. Until you've cut the root of delusion, there's no certainty. But karma takes care. Karma's logical. I mean, this is a law. This is the thing we have to keep remembering. It's a natural law. It's not something Buddha made up and imposes on us. It's a natural law. So, like any law, if you learn it well enough, you can trust it. You can trust it, and that's what our job is. Do you understand? It's having confidence in it. What else, people? Questions? Yes.
So you talked about with the habit that if you're doing something negative, we can just somehow do it without even noticing.
And that's how we mostly live our lives,
and the same
on autopilot.
Positive. So I had been thinking recently, like I don't even, when I go to rescue an animal, I don't have all those components of thinking about bodhicitta. It's just like it's automatic, like,
right.
Oh, I'm going to scoop this up. And in the morning I do my motivation. But should I be doing more in the moment? Like it's just so automatic. Am I missing a piece?
I understand.
Or is that
no, that's
good
fine. Having compassion, that's fine. So you got some programming when you see a sentient being having the gross level of suffering, you have compassion. So maybe you've got to now start having compassion for the subtle level of suffering, for the rich people and the famous people and the mean people. It's easy to have compassion for little innocent victims, and that's the only level of compassion we even think about. We'll talk more about that later. So maybe you just extend. And then when you do have compassion, then it's a question of, okay, when you take the Bodhisattva vows, okay, there are 3 sets of vows, 3 levels of practice, according to the 3 levels of vows, according to the levels of practice. So junior school and high school is the first level, and those are all the vows of what they call the morality of restraint, of refraining from harming, and we're the main beneficiary. So it's where we're reprogramming our minds and training ourselves to not kill and not steal and not lie, which brings all the good future results for us. The next level of vows, the Bodhisattva vows, they're about how to help others. But when we think of helping others, we usually think of it in those terms: being a nice person, helping poor animals, helping little children, helping the poor. Do you understand? But that compassion is fairly easy to have. But the real point about the Bodhisattva vows there are many of them. They're really clear ways of helping us see what is best for the person we're trying to help. So, you know, you have a vow, for example, all the secondary Bodhisattva vows are related to the 6 perfections. So the first lot are various vows in relation to helping you practice generosity. So one of those vows would be that if I ring you up and say, let's have lunch, Felicity, but you ring me up and invite me for lunch, and I just can't be bothered. Oh, I'm so busy, darling, I can't. Well, then I forget about lying, but I also broke my Bodhisattva vow, which is to help, that what's best for you is that because I prevented you from being generous to me. So these vows force you to know what's best for the other person, whereas we normally just follow what we want to do. So helping others is more profound than just helping and being nice to an animal. So the other one is when you're helping an animal, if it's dying or sick, then you have to help, how can you help its mind? Given it's going to die, how can you help its mind make sure it gets a human birth? And when we've really got wisdom, we always tell this story. This is where if we have clairvoyance, which the Buddha would say we can all get, as the Hindus, you get this with single point of concentration. Because why? It's because you access a subtler level of your mind. And because mind has the job to cognize, and what the mind cognizes is according to its level of grossness and subtlety. So conceptuality has certain objects, cognizes, senses cognize certain phenomena, and then you've got the subtle consciousness, which when we access it can cognize subtler phenomena like the past and the future and the minds of others. It's just how it is. So, you know, as Buddha would say, we really can't begin to really help others until we've got compassion, until we've got clairvoyance. So there's a story about Lama Yeshe, you know, our teacher, who was considered to have clairvoyance, you know, wisdom, compassion, all these other things, realizations. So what Harry, you know, Harry, our friend Harry is a meditator. He told this story. When he was at Kopan, our monastery in Kathmandu, it's a monastery, you know, it's a facility where foreigners come for courses, but it's also for the local monks. There's 600 Sherpa monks and Tamangpas and all the local people, you know. So there was one of the monks there who was very sick, a Sherpa, and Harry was trying to help him, and he found a doctor. So he told Lama Yeshe, he just out of interest, I found a doctor to help this monk, and Lama basically said to Harry, he doesn't need a doctor, let it be. So the monk got sicker and sicker, and he eventually went back up home up to the mountains, and he died. Now that sounds like Lama's being very cruel, but in fact Lama Lunduk, the abbot, explained to Harry, because of Lama's clairvoyance, he could see crystal clear the karma this monk created that is now ripening as this intense suffering. And he could also see that he would have got better, he would have been fine if he'd been given a doctor, but he wouldn't have purified this particular heavy karma. Life would be fine now, but next life even worse. Whereas by having the sickness, when he going home, and in fact he died very well, he purified all the karma, next life fantastic. So the wish to help is very easy for us when it's just, as often as a sentimental. We see it, you know, like if you were to see a dog that wasn't suffering, wasn't physically suffering, you wouldn't have compassion for it. Whereas if you understood its mind, Lama Zopa says that we could just for a moment have a direct insight into the mind of a little dog. An ordinary cute little dog, a rich dog, a poodle dog, a dog with mummies and daddies and homes and no physical suffering, whom we think is happy. He said just a moment of seeing their mind directly, the intensity of their mental suffering, and I'm putting these words on it, would be so unbearable that we would never waste another second of this human life. Now that's the next level of compassion, which is based on subtler wisdom. Do you understand? Yeah.
So if you want to become a Buddha, and overcome like all the delusions, why do we focus about other sentient beings?
Why do you want?
Why do I have to focus on others?
Why do I want?
Why do I have to focus on
Focus?
others? Yes, on others instead of focusing on myself.
On others?
Yes.
The wisdom wing.
Yes.
Junior school is controlling your body and your speech. Why? Because at the moment they're driven by delusions. So they cause us suffering in the future. And we don't want suffering. So why? We first level, we control our body and speech. We live in vows and we purify. That's logical?
Yeah.
The next level is still the wisdom wing. Now you've got the space to learn single point of concentration, to go to a deeper level of your mind, and to use the brilliance of your focus to unpack and unravel all the delusions and eventually develop unbelievable renunciation, knowing attachment and all the delusions very deeply, and you realize the enormity of the suffering from this. So by this point you're already an incredible being. You're blissful, you're radiant, you're calm, you're steady, you've got equanimity, and you're really, you've got the results of working on your body, speech and mind. You're the recipient of this. And if you completed the job there, you realize emptiness, and in one life or other you'd achieve your own nirvana, and by the end of that life you wouldn't come back. So that's the first level of realizations. And that's where you are the beneficiary. Do you understand? Yeah. But now, with the compassion wing, the Mahayana component, we've already got compassion. This is a really important point. When you've achieved your own nirvana, you're such an astonishing person, the world wouldn't believe you. We're so amazing, such outrageous qualities. You're subdued to the delusions. You're radiantly clear. You're radiantly blissful. You're so happy. You have love. You have compassion. You have all the virtues. You're an astonishing person. But because life after life after life after life, your goal has been to kind of graduate at high school. This is high school. You graduate, you decide you want to get out of samsara. Do you understand? And that's your goal. You get to the point where once you've achieved that, you've removed all the delusions, you've got compassion, you've got bucket loads of compassion. You see the suffering is unbearable. But when you die, your bliss overrides your compassion, and your goal, which you've programmed in yourself for many years, I must get out of samsara. When you die, your bliss and your motivation to get out of samsara override your compassion, and you don't come back. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you have the unique extra level of compassion, which is called great compassion, which is this special attitude, they call it, this courageous view, that once you realize, my God, now I know what suffering is and now I know its causes, that's junior school and high school, and you can see the results for you are bliss and joy and fulfillment, but you realize everybody else is in the same boat. How could I possibly leave them behind? So that when you have great compassion, which is, it's my job. If I don't help, who will? That's the unique characteristic of the compassion for the Bodhisattva path. So when you've got that compassion, and you then over life after life, your goal is to graduate at Buddhahood, university level, do you understand?
Yeah.
Not just high school. And when you die, your bliss is there, but your compassion overrides your bliss and you keep being reborn. So you can now help others. And only then, because the qualities, I mean, if we listed the qualities of a person who's achieved nirvana, who's literally removed their mind of all neuroses, all ego, all fears, all nonsense, we can't conceive of those qualities even in our culture. It's not, I mean, in our culture, we can't conceptualize it psychologically. It just sounds like religion. You'd be blissful, your mind is radiant, you have clairvoyance, there's not an atom of delusions, you can't cause suffering anymore. You're unbelievable, you have powers, you're an astonishing person. But if you compare those with even a lower level bodhisattva, you are nothing in comparison. Because bodhicitta is the emptiness is the same, but it's bodhicitta, this unbelievable aspiration to never give up working on others based on compassion that makes you 1,000,000,000 times more powerful, 1,000,000,000 times more beneficial, and 1,000,000,000 times more powerful. And it's bodhicitta that is the extra component added to wisdom that causes you to become a Buddha. Do you understand? Yes. Yes.
How do we practice to eliminate all the mental afflictions?
Doing what I'm saying. Go to junior school, stop killing, stop stealing, stop lying, and then purify your mind. That's junior school, where you control your body and speech and stop sowing more negative seeds. Then you get to high school and you can do concentration meditation and get some focus, and then to really be your own therapist and lessen the delusions. It's one step at a time. It's incremental. It's like learning music. You can't do it overnight. You've got to go one step at a time. Just get the methodology as it's all laid out in the literature and just follow the steps, just like you would do anything.
Oh, even we reach the one single point of meditation, but we still have those mental afflictions.
You do, but they're so utterly subdued, it's like a joke. I mean, just even the qualities of having realizations of single point of concentration, you've still got delusions, but they're complete. When you've got single point of concentration, you have effortless and total control over every single thought. The way that we think of our mind now, well, it's just chaos, isn't it? It's utter chaos. The thoughts are unceasing, and we have very little control over our body, speech, and mind, even if we're nice people. But when you've got this concentration, we can't conceive even of those qualities. And Buddha says we've had those in countless lifetimes. Unbelievable effortless control, and it's then easy to do the job of achieving realizations of emptiness now and getting rid of the delusions. I mean, most of us won't get the single point of concentration. It demands a lot of work. But just to see the benefits, even if we have control over our thoughts, unbelievable. I mean, you'd be radiant, you'd be joyful all the time, your body would be like a feather, you'd have clairvoyance, you're an extraordinary person. That's just single point of concentration. And it's not even technically a Buddhist teaching, it's a Hindu teaching. These Hindus invented this one, you know.
I think it's hard to to accomplish the...
What, darling?
Just one lifetime is no way to...
Do what?
For normal person, it's no way to get to the even single point concentration.
No, only...
You may need a...
No, you can't do it in ordinary life. It's not possible. Unless you're already a highly realized being, you can't do it at home in between cooking and eating and sleeping. You've got to go into an isolated situation, and like I said to him before, be really qualified already. Be totally subdued, have enormous amount of practice. I mean, one of our friends, Venerable Renee, do you ever invite him to come and teach? From California.
It's been a while since...
You really must, please. Excuse me. He's a great meditator. He's amazing. He's been a serious meditator for like 30 years, a Swiss monk. And I interviewed him 25 years ago in Mandalay, when he's been meditating since the 80s, since the 70s actually. So even then he told me about one of his retreats. It was a 2.5-year retreat at our center in Spain, Osaling, where Lama Yeshe's reincarnation was born. And he said he said, He said there's no way he was ready to even go to the mountains, metaphorically or otherwise, to get single point of concentration, unless he had already lived in vows, been a monk, already studied lots, done lots of purification, and even done teachings himself. That was his preparation. So it sounds easy to go get single point of concentration, but you're already highly qualified to even be able to get there, to have the perseverance to sit there for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for several years, to never give up with perseverance. I mean, you can't imagine the effort. How could you do this if you have husbands and wives and children and mortgages and fears and dramas and, hankering after chocolate cake? Forget it. Do you understand? I mean, we might do a retreat for one day and we're exhausted. You understand? So to have the perseverance will cause you to want to last for years. That's pretty intense. So one step at a time, it's okay. One step at a time, One step at a time. Long-term view. We've got to have long-term view. So let me talk about the power of vows. Lama Yeshe basically says we can't get ahead of the game without vows, This is something we really got to think about because, again, psychologically speaking, it's not how we talk in our culture. So what is a vow? A vow is a decision to refrain from something. Now, if you think that way, then we live our lives in vows already. We just don't call them that. When you learn to drive, think about this. The number of things you've learned to refrain from doing, you must have a list of 100. But you don't say, I've got to learn all these vows about how to drive. Oh, I hate vows. People telling me what to do. I mean, we're pathetic. We live our lives in these terms. You have to learn them. Otherwise, if you don't know when to put the foot on the accelerator and on the brake and the steering wheel, you learn all these things. I will do this and I won't do that. So we all know when you learn to do something and I will do this and I won't do that, it goes in more powerfully into your mind rather than just doing it occasionally. So we already understand vows. So the Buddha's vows, Buddha loves his vows. And Buddha says psychologically, vows are so potent, that even that they say in the teachings that living in the vows themselves, these have like a subtle form that's visible to clairvoyance. And that the power of vow, Lama Yeshe said you could have one person doing lots of practice every day, but doesn't have simply a vow not to kill. You have another person merely with a vow not to kill and keeping it purely, and not much other practice. The second person is sowing billions more positive seeds into their bank vault every second and purifying their mind, which is the bottom line. That's what we have to accomplish every day. So why are vows so powerful? Well, I think it's fairly logical. We began discussing this morning about the process of how we create karma. It's related first to the mind. And like I said, the word intention, not meaning like motivation, but intention, bare bones volition, I will. That's the start of everything in the universe. That's the start. And there's intention there every millisecond. And that starts the process of what then your speech does and what your body does, and indeed what the rest of your mind does. It starts with I will. So, if when we die, we need a bank vault full of delicious, rich, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds, apart from anything else, and because they are the cause of getting a decent human rebirth. And why we want a decent human rebirth is because that's at least where we can access our intelligence and our virtue, and we can practice and get ahead of the game. It's about the best of a bad lot, So the main cause of our mind going to a mother's human womb as opposed to the lion mummy's womb is our virtuous, powerful, virtuous karma of non-killing. But as Lama Yeshe says, probably for us, practice in the framework of having kept it as a vow. So why is a vow to not kill more powerful than just leading a life of occasionally not killing? Because here we are in this room right now. There is no volition, there's no thought, I will not kill, is there? And the reason is obvious, because there's no ant or cockroach or ex-boyfriend that you have to refrain from killing. So if there's no thought to not kill, we in reality aren't killing, but there's no virtue because there's no thought. We're resting on our laurels. Why we even are in a situation right now where we're not being threatened by anybody, whether it's cockroaches or terrorists, is because of past virtue of not killing. So here we are resting on our laurels of our past virtue, forgetting to sow more seeds. So the only way to get ahead of the game, if you're living in an environment, because everybody brings in all the exterminator, don't they, So we live in houses now where you don't meet many cockroaches, you don't meet many flies, maybe you don't meet many terrorists either. I mean, if you live in India, it's like living in Jurassic Park. Isn't it? I mean, the rainy season in Varanasi, I remember one year, I'm like in this hotel room with a big glass door, these creatures, it's like Birds movie, they're all crashing against the glass. There's billions of creatures. In Bodh Gaya, in the rainy season, at dusk, the ground is carpeted in billions of little sentient beings. So you're forced every second to think, I must not kill, I must not kill, I must not kill. So without a vow even, the only time you sow a seed of sow a seed of not killing is when you have the intention, I will not kill. And if we need bucket loads of not killing seeds when we die so we can get a decent human birth, then if we don't, so we won't create many non-killing seeds. So we're using up the past karma of non-killing, having an environment where we're not being threatened, and not thinking we have to sow more seeds. It's like we're born in this life with a really delicious veggie garden, so we just aren't we lucky, eating up all the veggies, forgetting that we have to sow more seeds for more veggies in the future. So whereas if you have a vow not to kill, as Rinpoche says, the Buddha says, it's in the mind, and a vow means you sit in front of somebody who represents the Buddha for you, and you make this decision. From now until the day I die, I will never kill. I will never that. And you put this deeply in your mind, and it becomes this powerful guide for your mind every second. And they say that 24 hours a day you have that vow in your mind stream. 24 hours a day you're ticking over, you're sowing virtuous karmic seeds, you're dropping virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing into your bank vault when there's even no intention. When you're walking in the street, when you're asleep, when you're jumping into bed with your new girlfriend, when you're at the pub with your boyfriend for a new cup for a beer, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing 24 hours a day. And the same with all the vows. So it's an easy way to create the positive psychological energy of virtuous thoughts. Are you communicating, people? It's a practical issue. It's practical. I mean, and it guides you. Like if I'm committed to Fidel as a partner, I've committed, I've looked in front of him, looked in his eyes with witnesses, I will not cheat on you, Fidel. I will take care of you. I will be your friend, you'll be your wife, whatever. Then that's the power of a vow. That guides me all the time. When I look at all the other cute boys, I'm reminded by my vow, and it keeps me on the straight and narrow. So it's psychologically very powerful for us. So vows protect, they protect us. And what? Protecting from what? Our own ridiculous, crazy delusions, because we're sick of negativity, we're sick of misery, and I want happiness, please. So vows are really powerful. So 24 hours a day, you're keeping your vow of not killing, not stealing, not lying. You're keeping your bodhisattva vows. It is utterly stupendous, the power that comes from that. It appears on the face of us to us like passive. On the contrary. And then, not only that, the vows also have a powerful function of purifying, of weakening those very tendencies in your mind. And then you add to that, at the end of the day, a purification practice. And Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. And you have the four opponent powers. You acknowledge the dumb things you've done that day. Regret. Why? Because I don't want further suffering. I badmouthed my boyfriend, kicked the dog in the teeth, did this, did that, lied, stole, killed my mother, whatever. You deeply regret because you're sick of suffering. It's for your sake, because I don't want further suffering. Then you think, well, whom can I turn to give me methods to purify? Well, the Buddha's our doctor. Not like with Christianity where you ask Jesus to forgive you. There's no concept of forgiveness here. Buddha would forgive you. He's a nice person. But it's not his job. It doesn't purify you. That's like going to your doctor and asking her to forgive you for smoking. Can you please stop me from getting cancer? No, it's not her job. She's giving you advice. It's up to you to do it. So you rely upon the Buddha, then you have compassion for the person you harmed, you do a little practice to purify, and you vow not to do it again. That's at the end of the day. So if you live a life like that, junior school, controlling your body and speech, attempting not to harm sentient beings, and purifying, in the context of vows, you have a happy practice. You can sit back and watch telly and eat popcorn. You've got a really good, rich, delicious practice. Whereas if you sit there for 4 hours a day watching your boring old breath, you're like not just treading water, you can't even keep afloat. There's not enough power in such a practice. But living in vows is stupendous level of practice. Alone. Forget about beginning to work on your mind yet. Don't underestimate. This is powerful, I tell you. Are we communicating here? Any more questions? Yes.
So then the vow cannot become habit?
It does become, this whole point becomes, that's its job, to make the habit really, digging your groove deep in your mind, to never kill, never lie, never steal. That's why a little boy who's age 3, having compassion for the lice in his own head, not to mention now being 40-something and never killing anything, is because he lived in vows. He completely perfected that habit. So waking up in this life with no thought to kill, and not living, and living in a situation where you don't get killed, and not having to kill, and being healthy and fat and healthy and living a long life. That's all the result of non-killing and living in vows. So it's an easy way to practice virtue.
Then I'm sorry, because I think I misunderstood. I thought earlier you said that doing something out of habit
Yeah.
was a negative.
No, even more powerful virtue, if it's virtue.
Oh, okay.
No, it's the power of it. When it's negative, it's like okay, good example. No, it's the power of it that's strong. But that's with virtue as well. Okay. So let's just say an example. The same with the other little boy who was a fisherman, who became a fisherman. The time he was a little boy, went to fishing for the first time. The karmic seed was there from the past habit. He doesn't know that, of course. He sees fishing. It triggers a very delicious feeling. Because of the past karmic connection, instantly attachment is triggered, which causes it to look delicious to him. So he runs like a magnet. And the logic is, of course, it must be good because it makes me feel happy, so I'll keep doing it. So you could argue that's so that he became a fisherman, meaning he defined himself as a fisherman. So even when he wasn't fishing, when he's at home having breakfast, everything in his life would have been within the framework of being a fisherman, fitting in with his schedule. Everything would have been defaulted to that. So it's like as if he had a vow to kill. Whereas if you kill occasionally, it's not nearly as negative as being defined as a killer. I'm not being rude about fishermen, so I'm just giving you an example. So that's like you're vowing to kill. So when you take vows of morality, you're defining yourself as a moral person. That's pretty stupendous on this planet. Wanting to be an ethical person, identifying yourself as being ethical, and guarding your mind, that's stupendous, that's marvelous. We should be so happy about ourselves, because that's the fruit, that's the cause of our own happiness. Whereas we're so addicted to thinking that being a good person, I'll get rewarded. No, forget that. It just brings your own results. It brings you your happiness, and it breaks all the old rubbish habits. We should be so delighted for ourselves. Part of our problem, I think, with spiritual path, I see this all the time. We feel guilty about feeling good about living in vows of morality and delighting for ourselves. Oh, that's selfish, we'll say. If we don't understand the benefit to ourselves first of eating well, how the hell can I help other people about eating well? I have to know the benefits myself. So I have to know the benefits to me of living in vows. This is what renunciation means. Renunciation really is like compassion for yourself. You realize now, finally, you are sick of suffering. But now, bullseye, you know what causes it. Your ridiculous delusions and your ridiculous past habits. So I'm going to give it up. Of course I am. Well, I don't want suffering. You've got to want that. You've got to delight in that and be joyful about wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Then you can help others. We'll never have that. We'll never have real compassion for others until we've got it for ourselves. But they happen to call it renunciation. Do you understand? What else, people? Yes.
Would you like to answer my previous question that you postponed of vegetarianism?
Okay, I'll do that. So perhaps I think the bigger question is, what is the karma we create from using the bodies of other beings, the bodies of animals? But I think my own opinion is we're so obsessed with food, we're so attached to eating, we always only frame it as in terms of eating meat, I mean, you wear silk. The silkworms suffer in a terrible way. They die a monstrous death. They're boiled alive. A silkworm is its own little cocoon, and its silk is all long. And if you cut the silk to get the worm out, then you cut the silk. So you've got to boil it alive, so the little creature inside can die. So then you can unpack the silk. You don't cut the silk. So it's monstrous. You look at all the clothing we have. Animals. I mean, no one ever asks the question, what's the karma of wearing a leather belt? It's the same thing. But I think because we're attached to food, we're very obsessive about food, is my feeling. That's one tiny point. So it's much bigger than merely eating meat, I'd suggest. Even though the meat industry is pretty horrific. Apparently it's destroying the planet, not to mention anything else, not to mention the way the beings suffer. But the other one that's really evident too, but which we never think about, or if we do, we just dismiss it as when you can't help it, is that the bigger picture in Buddhism is that just by existing in the nature of this samsaric world, there are trillions of sentient beings. Wherever there is the four elements, you're going to find sentient beings existing. We know that our body is a walking zoo, right? Apparently you're a doctor, you should know. I mean, our armpit under here is walking, our mouth is an entire ecosystem of sentient, they're real sentient beings. Mind possessor is the term in Tibetan for sentient being. So there's the Buddha, there are trillions upon trillions of mind possessors pervading even the universe we know. So just by existing, we can't help but harming them. We're breathing. Just by existing, we harm others. So that's the bigger picture. So if that's so, then what choice do we have? We can't not live. So we have to at least start by having the intention, the aspiration. I must at least attempt, if I meet a sentient being, try not to harm it. The best we can do is that, and then even better, live in vows. And we're the beneficiary of this. We're still going to harm sentient beings. And then do what we can to mitigate, to lessen the harm we do to sentient beings. But eating meat is one part of it, just one small part of it. I mean, eating vegetables. And I say this purposely, the fundamentalist vegans, I upset people when I say this, but never mind. I remember one time, I always quote this story. So if you've heard it 47 times, if I'm on the, whatever it is, I always say this. People tell me they hear the story all the time. So one time in England, I was in this cheese shop in Liverpool, and I sent a picture for Facebook, because Kate does my Facebook page. And I had a picture of me buying this kick-ass cheddar. Kick-ass cheddar, okay? It was delicious English cheddar. I love English cheddar. So these fundamentalist vegans, at least two of them, one of my friends and another person I didn't know, how dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese, that kind of thing. So I didn't want to be political. So anyway, I'd always wondered, for myself, I always wondered anyway, how many creatures die on the road when you drive a car, okay, the bugs. You think about it. So of course you can Google it, someone's done the homework. It was amazing. Some Dutch guy, I can't remember all the details, but it was something like he just even did some analysis about the number of bugs that get killed just on the number plate. And it was like countless trillions per car, per kilometre, per whatever. You can't even imagine. Now, from the Buddhist point of view, they're real sentient beings. They have been dogs and monkeys and cows and chickens and humans in the past, and they suffer like we do and don't want suffering and do want happiness. So they're real sentient beings, and they suffer brutally. They're smashed. Their little bodies, we know of the red splats on our windscreen, you know, instant, violent death. So we go, well, you can't help that. That's what you do. And the fact that we're not eating them doesn't seem to matter so much. Now, the other one's even closer to home. Okay, so I put that story on, purposely not saying vegans and vegetarians drive cars, which is true, but we don't have to think about it. We can't get yucky, you know. So the other point, I then saw this story, an Australian scientist, I think he was complaining about the fundamentalist vegans as well. I mean, I say fundamentalist meaning anybody who's fanatic. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, to be vegan, vegetarian, whatever we are, is astonishing. To want to live a better way, to not harm sentient beings, you should be crying with compassion. It's incredible, incredible, incredible. So, this fellow talked about this wheat field, and there must be wheat fields all over the planet where you grow wheat. Who for? Probably 20% for the bulls, for the meat eaters, and 80% for the vegans and vegetarians. Right? Would that be true? Would that be true, people? Would that be correct? Wheat is eaten by people, isn't it? And some eat meat eaters, some feed the bulls whom the non-vegetarians eat, and then others who like their bread, and then especially the vegans and vegetarians, who only eat the wheat. Well, you know, while the wheat is not growing, the ground is covered by millions of these cute little field mice. He had pictures of them. He said they sing love songs to each other. Real sentient beings. So of course, what they have to do when they have to grow the wheat is kill the millions of little field mice. Now even one of these people on Facebook, he even said, well, you can't help that, doesn't matter. But I mean, just because you don't eat their body, it doesn't matter they have to get slaughtered? Excuse me, where's the logic there? So this for me is irrefutable logic. Those creatures are consciously killed, millions of them, little field mice, because we have to grow wheat. But how is that different from killing the field mice and then eating its body? It's because we're so attached to eating, we think the eating part makes it so shocking. So yes, the meat industry is terrible, but there's more to it than merely whether you eat meat or not. We've got to think a bit bigger. That's all I'm suggesting. That's my answer. You with me, people? Which doesn't mean, oh good, I can now eat meat, it doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. It is not. But we get all a bit sort of religious and a bit sort of fundamentalist, and as soon as we are stopping eating meat, we then start to think we're a holy person. Oh no, just because I personally don't put their flesh in my mouth, suddenly I'm okay. It's totally self-centered view. Those creatures, there's going to be a bit, I think the tipping point for the number of fish to get not killed by the number of people who become vegetarians is a big tipping point. So I mean, we shouldn't be so, all I'm saying is, amazing to not eat flesh, but don't just think it's the answer to everything. That's all I'm saying. We've got to be, no, not you, just for the minute. Just for the minute. Be quiet. So, the other point is that we never factor in the world, this is the Buddhist view, that it's not just, what do you call it, what do we say it is, demand. You're not just What's the word we use? Something in demand, we say it.
Supply.
Supply and demand, it's not just that. We don't factor in karma. I never forget one year, I read in New York Times or somewhere, in Massachusetts, which is, in Maine, which is lobster country, okay? In Maine, 1 year, in this one season, suddenly 10 times more lobsters popped up in the water of Maine. No one ordered them. But the karma of those beings to be born lobsters in the water. And so part of it was the karma, I think, of the fishermen. They all got excited in the beginning, but then they deflated the price and they all went poor. So the poor Maine state government had to spend millions of dollars marketing these wretched, glut of lobsters. Because in the end, so it's not just supply and demand. If there are sentient beings to be born as lobsters, they're going to get born, baby. And then, if you think, well, all the lobsters will get stopped killing, well, they'll just get born as a chicken. And if the chicken factory run out, then the people who do the killing of the chickens will also have the karma to keep killing, so they'll go kill the fish instead. So unless you change the karma from all points of view, don't hold your breath. We're going to suddenly have a perfect, environment where nobody eats meat anymore. But all we can do individually is do what we can. And that includes being political. Fantastic. I mean, apparently the meat industry is more than just where they harm sentient beings. It's destroying the planet, I hear. I don't know all the details. So there's more to it than that. But there's more to it in general. Being conscious of the fact that we are harming just by existing. And given that we can't make it all perfect, doing what we can, starting from intention, living in a vow not to kill, and as much as we can, not wanting, and then developing compassion as we go, doing our best, Does that make sense, people? What else?
What do you think of the Native Americans and their tradition of thanking the animal, the spirit of the animal?
I understand that. I understand. I understand.
Before eating.
I understand. I can't say. I mean, all I can do is look at karma, the view of karma, without being judgmental about anybody. Just looking at karma as a law that Buddha would say is a natural law that he has observed runs the universe, in which we, as we progress, can also observe runs the universe. So we have to verify it ourselves. But the law would say. So even the fact that you're born into a culture where you even have the thought to kill the buffalo. And then out of kindness, you thank the buffalo. Well, that's kind, isn't it? But you still have to kill the buffalo. There's still called the tendency to kill. It's just you're not that brutal. That's all. You're not that mean about it. At least you're grateful to the buffalo. Well, that makes it better than just being mean to the buffalo, isn't it? So I'm not being personal about people. So there's a respect there for the environment and not unbalanced. Like when the Chinese communists, unfortunately, went along and took over Tibet. I mean, one of the main reasons, I remember one time he was in tears, the way the whole world, the whole ground, the whole land had been destroyed, because it's greed that does that. They didn't hardly kill a thing. I think they killed a few yaks or something, but there was never an imbalance of the environment. There was no poverty, there was no starvation. The animals weren't even wild, because people left them in peace, so there was nothing was out of whack. So when greed comes along, and self-centeredness and anger, it destroys everything, And so at least if you do live in a culture where you might kill the one buffalo and you're grateful to it and don't kill more than one, well, it's better than killing two, but it's still called killing. I mean, it's not absolute, because every karma we do is mitigated by all the other conditions and the circumstances, you understand? I mean, Australian Aborigines are these astonishing people. I mean, their culture's so unusual. They were left alone by the white people for like 40,000 years. So they could develop their own amazing view of the universe. I don't really understand it. It's so subtle. They call it dream time. It's very unusual. And their relationship with the planet, with the earth, But they I mean, you say they're quite cruel with creatures. They eat live beings. They eat, live bugs, and they kill lots of creatures. So there's a tendency to kill is one thing in minds. We get born with that. So it's very rare on this planet to find any groups of people who don't kill. I think it's the Hindus, the ones who don't have much karma to kill, and that comes from the time before the Buddha.
The Jains even more.
Who?
The Jains.
Jains.
Oh, the Jains even more, yeah. So it's really coming from India, where there was this real view that sentient beings, trying to not harm any sentient beings. So it's very rare. I mean, I was born of a Catholic, and I love my Catholic upbringing, but we were taught that God made other creatures without a soul for our benefit. And many Christians think it's kind of an honour to kill God's creatures, and that's why God made them. I mean, that's a very curious view, I'm not being rude about it. So most beings kill something. It's very powerful. Yeah.
When you're talking about the Native Americans, I can't help to think because of their relationship with the earth, and earlier talking about intention. This giving up their life so that the other life can live.
Sorry, what do you do? What?
And my point, I guess, with the Native Americans, intention and motivation for survival in every way is a balance with the earth.
I don't know what you mean in relation to killing. How does it play out? What you're saying? What you're saying is what?
I don't see it as a negative.
Which piece?
Pardon?
Which piece is not negative?
In Native Americans, when they are participating.
No, I'm just talking about the actual simple karmic. All I'm talking about, being very isolated, very precise, is observing that one of the ways any sentient being's karma ripens is as a tendency to do something. So all I'm asking is, if I'm talking about a particular person, you're calling it a Native American, I don't know about their culture, that a person who might even live in balance with the universe and have respect for the earth and even thank the being that they kill, they've still got a tendency to kill. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. They've got a tendency to kill because they've killed before. So when we understand karma, you don't just, you kill because you killed before.
Then the person who gives their life so somebody else.
Pardon, darling?
So then the person.
Which person?
Somebody who gives their life so somebody else can live.
Who? Where? Who? Which one? Who's doing
I
that?
give my life so that the lioness can feed her cubs.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused now. Who's doing that in the context we just said before?
The Buddha did. The Buddha
I know, but what's that got to do with the story I just told?
well,
About a person who kills a buffalo and then thanks the buffalo.
Try to explain it.
Huh?
So, I'm sorry, I can finish, I can try to explain.
Good, yeah, so how is this? No, just double check we're checking. I'm using an example of a person, and I don't want to say American Indian, a person who has a view of balance of the universe, but still has a tendency to kill and then thanks the being they killed. So I'm discussing simply the habit to kill. That's all I'm talking about, right here. So now you'd like to say something else, and I'd like to hear it, but is it in relation to what I just said, or is it another whole question?
No, absolutely, no, I'm not going off the tangent. But I'm trying to understand it is the person who gives their life so that...
So who is this person who does this? Give an example.
A human being whose name is George.
Okay.
I don't care.
Yes.
Gives his life so that other people can live.
Yes.
Does that mean he has a tendency to die?
Oh, darling, don't do that. No, darling. Dying is not an action. Dying is a consequence. An action is an intentional thing that you do with your body and speech that comes from a thought. So a person who gives their life for another, that's the habit of compassion. That's the greatest compassion. That's astonishing. That's,
simply suggesting
it's a billion times percent. That's called compassion, which is the wish to give your life in order to help another. That's called compassion. That's not killing anybody.
That the person who is killing and for the balance of the universe also is doing that.
No, because the universe is not a sentient being. It's just an idea of respecting all the components of the universe. It's still the tendency to kill. So my main point is that can be not nearly as negative as another person who kills just for the sake of it. I'm comparing, but what I'm getting at is finally, you still, even though it's a mitigating thing, there's still a tendency to kill in that person, and due to past killing, and every time they kill, they're growing the habit to keep killing, and therefore growing the habit to have the fully ripened result of killing, and they have a tendency to kill and be killed, etc., etc., etc. That's what I'm saying.
Do you see it in...
Just a moment, please, darling. Hang on. So you see the point I'm making, or not? Okay, good. Yes, I'll really go.
Do you see it as being, as let's say, the sin of eating meat as being mitigated if you are not the butcher, but you still eat it, somebody else kills it?
Everything, okay, every millisecond, every sentient being is doing or thinking and doing and saying something. So each person's on their own trip. Each person's creating their own karmas, their own seeds, right? So I could be the one who, let's say, has the thought, oh, well, kill the chicken. I'm going to kill the chicken now so I can have lunch. I'll offer it to my babies. That's many people do that. So the motivation's good to feed people, but you're going to kill the chicken. So then there's me who's the recipient, like Mummy, Daddy, our father would go out and kill the chook and we'd have it for lunch, right? So then I'd be the recipient and I'd get the chook's flesh. So clearly I didn't have, technically speaking, every karma we create comes from our own thought. Now if I say, oh, I'm so glad Daddy killed that chicken, I didn't have to, then that's even heavier than Daddy doing it. So everything's to do with what's in your mind. Every millisecond our mind is doing something. So you can argue one person who, let's say, is a vegetarian, and then she goes to her grandma's house and grandma offers her a lamb chop, and she had to go spend money to buy this little lamb chop, then, you know, even if you're a vegetarian, out of kindness for your grandmother, eat the lamb chop, please. On the other hand, you know, I mean, everything's to do with what's in your mind. Every second, what's in your mind, and then your motivation for what you're doing. So everyone's different levels of karma. Every second, we've got different levels of karma. But clearly, in general, I mean, for example, you might eat fish. In general, one of the things that vegetarians say, well, you're as bad as the fishermen, they'll say, if you eat the fish. But no one ever says, well, you know, the people working in the fishing rod factory are as bad as the fishermen. I would suggest that's heavier karma than even the fishermen, because they're working in a job where you earn money, and every bit of job you do is to help you create fishing rods, which helps people die. That's heavier karma, much heavier than even that person who might even be a vegetarian, because their job is related to making an instrument that kills sentient beings. That's much heavier, but no one ever says that. It's only if we eat it, because we're so emotional about eating. That's my suggestion, my thought. Are you seeing what I'm saying, people? I mean, working in a fishing rod factory, working in a gun factory, I've never heard anybody demonstrating you're as bad as the murderer. They don't get arrested. No one arrests the gun maker. And even though the gun makers are the main ones, they create the things and create a massive industry. And the poor little working class guy on the street gets arrested. But not the guy who makes the $1 million. I mean, that karma's 1,000,000 times heavier than the person on the street, because the consequences of their actions are so much more powerful. Are you seeing what I'm saying, people? It's quite nuanced. It's not as simple as it looks, you know. Go on.
So when you use the word tendency,
Or habit, same thing. Same.
That's not the same as intent.
No. Tendency is meaning the habit. I have a tendency to do something, is a habit to do something. But intention is the thought to do something. That's quite different.
My intention is good.
Your motivation is good. You have the intention and then you have the motivation.
But I have the tendency to kill in that situation. Well, how does that play with my karma?
Which is the motivation that's good? The person who kills the buffalo, you mean?
Yeah. Maybe the intention, maybe it's afflictive.
No, intention is I will kill the buffalo. Motivation, I don't know what's the motivation? To eat dinner, I suppose. To eat dinner, well, that's called attachment. It's very simple. That's called attachment. The motivation is attachment. Why the fisherman's motivation is not to harm the fish. It's attachment. So why do you eat cake? Attachment. Why do you have sex? Attachment. Why do you kill animals for food? Attachment. It's very simple. It's called attachment. The basic delusion is attachment. You might, let's say, because you've got to feed starving people, then compassion is there as well, isn't it? Each one is quite precise. Yes. Back there.
Is the attachment to survival?
What, darling?
Attachment to survival?
No, survival is that's okay, but that survival is a concept we made up in the West. And we impute that upon people, instinct for survival. It's just Mr. Darwin's kind of way of presenting something. I mean, no, you can say it like that, but it's a craving. Lots of people don't eat meat. Lots of people who are starving don't eat meat, they eat berries and grass. And I mean, you know, koalas don't go and kill each other to eat meat. They don't have a tendency to kill. They don't tend to eat meat. They eat gum leaves. They eat eucalyptus leaves. Some creatures are vegetarian, some human. So there's no tendency to kill. It's very specific.
Now, in highest yoga tantra Buddhism, even the monastics are allowed to not only take a partner for maithuna, but also to eat meat and drink alcohol. No,
it's not even called meat and alcohol. It's got a certain, you don't even give it those names. There's a special name you should call them. They're representative of something. They're not meat. It's not eating meat and alcohol. And as for a partner, that's only the highest level practitioners, the highest, most advanced yogis and yoginis, and it's got zero to do with attachment, zero to do with harm.
That's my point. I was going to say that I like your emphasis on the state of mind.
Yeah, that's right. It has to be that.
Yeah.
That's what determines the karma we create.
But the terms I've used are actually in the Dalai Lama's book.
I understand.
On the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, I understand. Well, this is not Tibetan Buddhism. This is Vajrayana Buddhism, which comes from India as well. But Tibetans are the ones who practice it. Yeah.
Robina, can you expound a little more on collective?
Collective karma just means we do things together, so we experience results together. That's it.
So the example that you gave about that wheat and the rats.
The what?
Mice and the wheat. I mean the vegetarian people collecting the karma because it's a collective karma.
Don't make it complicated. We are social beings, aren't we? We are born into families and cultures and countries and suburbs and groups, and we do things together in groups, don't we? So then we experience the results in groups. That's it. That's what collective karma means. That's all it means. That's all it means.
So how does it impact us? I mean, even if you're
If you thought about it, you wouldn't need to ask the question. A group of people is a bunch of individuals who have a mind. Each of them intentionally does a certain thing and they do it together as a group. So they create the cause to be born together as a group later on and experience the result of that as a group. That's it. Huh? Can you hear that?
I got it.
Okay, so does that answer your question? Huh?
Okay.
About how karma, we're social beings, look at us. I mean, Nepalis have group karma, white people have group karma, females have group karma, dogs, everybody has groups, the Nazis had a group karma, the Jews have a group karma, the Tibetans, group karma at the hands of another group called the Chinese Communists, We're always doing things in groups, so we create the cause to experience the results in groups, either happiness or suffering. So a bunch of people who are born in a little town somewhere where everyone doesn't lock their doors and no one steals anything. Collectively, they're experiencing the fruits of their own past collective non-stealing.
So if you create a cause, how long does it take to meet with the right conditions?
1 billion lives or a second, one or the other.
So
Depends on the strength of the karma.
We don't know.
When you know the law, you will know.
No, if you keep...
When you know the law, you will know. When you don't know botany, you don't know when it's going to grow. When you know botany well, you can predict what will happen, can't you?
Yes.
Same with karma.
So if you keep positive, like virtuous thoughts...
What, darling?
If I keep virtuous thoughts, let's say if I engage virtuous actions, I'm not sure whether it's going to ripen a positive result or not.
No, that's not true. You know that a rose seed will ripen as a rose, not an apricot.
Yeah, but I don't know when it's going to ripen.
Well, then if you know botany, you will know.
So when is it
If you know botany, you will know. What's your name, damn boyfriend? What's his name again? Shush! Shush, you two boys make me crazy.
So
Stop.
how do you know exactly when it's going to happen?
Fidel, she said stop.
Okay, shut up, Fidel.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm not being a very polite Buddhist here. I'm shocking this monk, I think. He looks very polite. Now listen, darling.
Yeah.
Stop asking all these intellectual questions. Think.
I'm thinking.
Shush! If you want to understand what flower will ripen first in your garden, you have to learn botany. So you study it and you think about it, don't you? It's the same here, precious. You think about karma. I can answer all your individual questions till the cows come home, but I don't want to do that. You have to learn the law of botany, and all the literature is there for you to study it if you want to know. Are you with me? That's the answer to your question.
Because...
that's the answer to your question, precious.
My question is, sometimes they tell you, if you're going to do like Vajrasava retreat, and then you do 100 prostration, 100 Vajrasava retreat, this is going to happen. And that's going to happen. What if you do it and it doesn't happen? I mean...
You're going to have to study it to find out.
I don't know.
Does anybody like to dare ask another question, or we just continue talking about these things? Yes, what is it?
What is the relation between self-grasping and the arising of attachment?
Attachment's the main voice of self-grasping. Yeah.
Can you become attached to attachment? To gaining attachment?
What do you mean? Why would you want to be attached?
Well,
what do you
because
mean?
if you experience a moment of attachment or enlightenment, whatever.
No, attachment is a delusion, darling. Enlightenment is a virtue. So which one are you talking about?
Enlightenment.
Okay, good.
So if I have a moment of enlightenment and I experience that, can I then have attachment towards enlightenment?
So then why is that interesting to you?
Because would that be a negative karmic seed, even though it's connected to enlightenment?
I don't understand. Honey, all these questions are getting, I'm starting to show you, I'm extreme impatience here. Okay, I'm so sorry. If you are attached to something virtuous, and it is attachment, it won't last, you'll get bored, because one of the consequences of attachment is you overinflate it, and then you get bored. So it won't last, so there's no benefit. But you can talk about it in the Bodhisattva path using attachment. If you're going to be attached to having a friend, at least choose a decent friend who will not lead you up a garden path. If you're going to be attached to food, don't be attached to food that will harm you. So given that you've got attachment, and we're going to be a long time before we get rid of it, be reasonable and sensible with it and mitigate it with virtue and good qualities. And eventually when we understand the real suffering of it, then we'll understand that we have to give it up. But that's very high. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's talk more about attachment then. Because if it is the source of our suffering in daily life, and the source of all the other delusions. If you didn't have attachment, you would never get angry, you'd never be depressed, you'd never have anxiety, you'd never have panic, you'd never get jealous. You would not possible, because attachment is the root of them. So if it is the source of all the other dramas and therefore the source of our suffering, it's obvious. If it is that, we better know what Buddha means by it, not just make up our own story, you know. So like I said, the most primordial level of it is dissatisfaction, which drives us to then to hanker after something that we think we're missing. And then that drives us to then inflate the value of the thing we're craving for and believe that when I get it, I'll get happiness. So that can all the way to be, that can be something as simple as exaggerating the deliciousness of a cake, to all the way to exaggerate the whole thing about having the partner, the family, the kids, the house, and all the whole drama that is very powerful in our culture. You know, the whole scenario. You know, attachment overinflates. Attachment distorts. Attachment is disturbing. Attachment is neurotic. Attachment is self-centered. Attachment is a vampire. Attachment is deeply neurotic, deeply disturbing, deeply seriously mental illness. And I say these words kind of purposely because it's so shocking to us. Because whatever Buddha means by attachment, we recognize it. But because it's so primordial and so constant, we just go, oh, it's natural. And what we mean by natural is you'd be unnatural if you didn't have it. So it's quite sobering, you know. And when we read the literature, you know, it's a bit depressing because it sounds so fundamentalist. So we just have, all we can do is hear about it. Try and attempt slowly, by observing our own daily life, identifying it. So one of the key problems with it, I mean, if your weeds grew in one end of your garden and the herbs grew in the other, it will be easy to identify them. But they don't. They grow together. So you have to learn botany to distinguish them, and that's a good analogy. So for us, because, you know, let's say I love somebody, I love Fidel. Love is under the positive heading. Love is a virtue. It's spacious. It's valid. It's reasonable. It's connected to reality. Her reality is dependent arising. So love is, when you've got love for somebody, it's not just you, it's connected to another. You delight in their happiness. You want them to be happy. You see them more clearly. Your mind is less disturbed because you've got less attachment. Love is clear. Love is connected. Love is interdependent. It's a virtue. It's valid. But we only love those we're attached to. That's the trouble. So we conflate them. And we can't imagine loving somebody you're not attached to. And we can't imagine having attachment for someone you don't love. That's bizarre. Because we conflate them. We think they're the same. And because in our culture we don't make a distinction between neurotic, I-based, deluded states of mind and valid, virtuous, positive ones, you know. But the trouble is, the difficulty of why it's hard is because they come together, seemingly come together. We only love those we're attached to, and we're only attached to those we love. So we have to see the difference. And again, the trouble is, so there are many things conspiring against us seeing our minds, okay, which is the essence of the job of being a Buddhist. So the first one is, from the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep, look where all our attention goes. By the nature of who we are, our attention goes to the outside. That's what we mean by life. Life for us is out there, and we have to have it. So life is out there. So all of our pursuit from the second we wake up is all in terms of the outside world. So we pay attention to there. So that's the first reason we don't notice what's going on in our mind. Because things are going on in our mind every second, we don't notice it until it's violent. In other words, another way to put that, we don't notice it in our thoughts before it becomes emotional, which means we don't notice what's going on in our mind at the level of thoughts before it becomes emotional, because when it's emotional, the body is involved, and this plays a huge role in our lives. When we think of feelings and emotions, we think of physical feelings. When you're jealous, look at the pain physically you're feeling. Look at depression when you're inert and can't get out of bed. Look at an angry person, their body is gone berserk, they are violent. Their body is shaking and screaming. So we think of emotions and feelings when it comes to the body being involved, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. Oh, that's really no better. That's already the earthquake exploding. Or it's like you're driving on the freeway at 100 miles an hour and you suddenly notice your wheels are falling off. So the analogy is perfect. In other words, you've never thought of mechanics, you never noticed the wheels wobbling because you didn't pay attention. You only now pay attention because you're forced to, because the wheels are falling off. And that's the only time we go to our therapists, the only time we go to the psychiatrist, is because we don't think of what's going on in here because it's too quiet. We don't notice it because we're obsessed with the outside. So when it becomes really powerful and comes to the surface, the wheels then fall off. Then we think, I'd better get a therapist. But that's when you want to kill yourself or kill your boyfriend. And it's just too late. It's not too late, but we only look when it's extreme. In other words, even meditation, we think of as an alternative to a pill. So if I'm happy with Fidel, we're having a lovely relationship, looks like, meaning it's mostly attachment, but we don't see it as suffering. It looks like we're just having a lovely time. And someone says, oh, Robina, you should learn meditation. I go, what are you talking about? I'm happy. We assume meditation is only when you're mentally ill, when you're having a mental breakdown, when the wheels fall off. That's demented. The Buddha's view is the mind is working since we're born. The mind is working every day. The sooner we learn to be in control of our body, speech and mind, then the less likely for the wheels ever to fall off. This is really, really serious. I swear to you, if we were brought up with techniques that we knew we could use every day to be familiar with our thoughts and feelings and emotions and mind and body and speech, we would never have mental breakdowns. We would never be killing and lying and stealing and going crazy. But we wait till it's too late to even notice. And that's because we emphasize the body. With the body, we make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe says. We don't notice what goes on in our mind. As Lama Zopa says, it sounds pretty shocking, but it's really true. The vast majority of all humans on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. And I would add, not only do we not know that what goes on in our mind plays any role at all, we don't even know what goes on in our mind. That's our insanity. So no wonder we have problems, crashing around, smashing, killing, wheels falling off, and then we think, oh, I better go to the mechanic. No, you should have thought that a long time ago. So all this is conspiring against us to see the mind. And when, of course, attachment gets what it wants, then nice feelings come, and we're junkies. We're just completely caught up in the bubble of our own attachment. The first level of suffering that's described in the first stages of practice, which is the first and second scopes, which is junior school and high school, which is the wisdom wing, is the suffering of bad things happening in the Four Noble Truths, Buddha's first teaching. The first is, there is suffering. The second is, there are causes. The third is, guess what, folks, you can get rid of it. And fourth is how to do it. Well, the first one, there are 3 levels of suffering, Buddha says. And the first one is the one we already know, when the bad things happen. And that's the only one we know about, and that's why the only compassion we have is when the bad things happen for the poor animals and for the poor little children. We don't look at suffering at a subtle level at all, and that's what attachment is. This is why it's quite depressing to hear it, because as Lama Zopa says, because we conflate attachment with happiness, attachment with joy, attachment with good things. When we hear that we're supposed to give it up, we go, oh, I've got to give up my happiness, I've got to give up my heart, because we conflate those. But attachment is a poison, is a neurosis, is a mental illness that we can't even conceive of. In other words, if you saw it in raw form, like you do in really crazy people, in really evil people, in really deluded people, you see it, that's because of attachment. They lie, steal, kill. That's the source. To get what I want is this junkie in us. But when it's mitigated by our love and our kindness and our compassion, we just don't notice attachment. It's this honey-covered razor blade. It's so much more subtle than we imagine. That's why we don't think we're suffering. It's really quite hard, this stuff. It sounds kind of depressing initially, because we're so used to it. We think it's normal behavior. So the first kind of suffering is when the bad things happen. And that's why, because at least that level we can say fairly evidently, I don't want that. I don't want to get lied to, stolen from, killed, harmed, have a difficult life, get sick. Then the solution, Buddha says, is, well, don't create the causes. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partners. Don't badmouth, etc., etc. It's pretty straightforward advice, quite simple, really. A consequence of that, at least you won't get that suffering. First, good start. And then you get another decent human birth so you can keep on moving on your path. But the next level, junior high school, that's when we get to the subtler level, the more nuanced level of suffering, which gets to the root of the problem, which is attachment. This, again, like this dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction is the consequence of having practiced attachment in past lives. So then if you've got dissatisfaction, it means something's missing. So if something's missing, you've got to fill up the gaping hole. And the obvious one is the boy, the sex, the drugs, the food, the this, the that. The objects of the senses. And that's so what drives most of us in daily life, even if we're nice people, is attachment. It sounds depressing to hear this. And the point about attachment the Buddha's pointing out to us is very simple. And we know it, it's scientific truth, but it makes us too uncomfortable. Okay, in the third category of states of mind, that they sort of call neutral, I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. A murderer needs good concentration, good focus, good memory, all those, that's exactly what a meditator needs. So they're not virtuous in their nature, nor are they non-virtuous in their nature. That's why I got to call them the mechanics. But we need them to create virtue, and a murderer needs them to create non-virtue. Mindfulness technically is just the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. It's not a virtue. We make it virtue, and all these bells and whistles to it. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. So in that category called the third one, I'm calling the mechanics. This sounds odd initially, but hear it. It's really crucial to understand. It's called feeling. So given the way we are constructed in this desire realm, as Buddha calls all these, the human, animal, all these rebirths, we're in the desire realm, which means driven by desire, driven by attachment, the consequence of attachment. So then within this, the way we're constructed, we either have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neutral feelings. But they're very specific ones, so let's just forget the neutral. So basically, we know we only want good feelings and we don't want unhappy feelings. That's pretty evident. So these aren't virtuous or non-virtuous. These are nothing to do with virtue or non-virtue. They're just the way we're made. There's pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings. And this is attachment's job. So attachment is under the heading, the negative, and its job description is this junkie in there, this vampire. Its job is to find the objects of the senses such that when we have contact with them, a pleasant feeling is triggered. So that's what we call happiness. Happiness is a bunch of pleasant feelings. Unhappiness is unpleasant feelings. And we can see there's a whole spectrum. You can have the mildest pleasant feeling to the most intense bliss in the universe. You can have the mildest unpleasant feeling to the most intense nightmare in the universe. We can see that. And so attachment's job is to make sure we find the objects such that when we have contact with them, pleasure is triggered. And the millisecond we get the object that doesn't trigger pleasure but triggers unpleasantness, that's when we get angry. And that's when we freak out. So we spend our lives, attachment spends our life manipulating, finding, searching for, getting the object. So the trouble here is all Buddha's saying is this is right now the method we use to get happy. It's the only method we have. Think about your life. Any pleasant feelings, any happiness as we call it, that's come is always in reference to people, things, smells, touch and taste. There's subtle levels of attachment, I'll go there in a minute, which is just getting to this one, eventually, finally, the deepest one. But this is just the obvious level. So attachment is like I said, the best way to call it is a junkie. It's frantic every second to only get the object. It really what we're really wanting is the happy feeling, not even the body. I don't even want the body. But attachment conflates his deliciousness, makes him look handsome to me, then that triggers a pleasant feeling. So really my attachment uses him. You know how girls feel like boys use them? You understand that when we're little and you think the boy likes you, and all you realise I want to get in your pants. That's how girls talk, not boys talk that way, but probably we all manipulate each other now. But that, you feel like you're being used. That's exactly attachment's job. It uses everybody. It's easier to be nice to Fidel, isn't it, than to have to bash him up and make him do what I want. It's easier to be nice to him, to seduce him, then he'll do what I want. So attachment uses everybody. Attachment is brutal. Attachment is a monster. Attachment is a complete hysterical junkie. Its job is to get what I want every millisecond. That's its nature. That's just what it does. That's all it does. And why? Because people often say, where is fear in the list of Buddhist psychology? Fear is the flavor of all delusions. Fear is the nature. So we are living in a constant state of panic. And so all we've got to do is alleviate the fear by getting what attachment wants. At least it stops it for a while. Because the millisecond we know attachment doesn't get what it wants. The millisecond Fidel looks at me the wrong way. The millisecond the food isn't exactly what I want. The millisecond the sound isn't what I want. Panic attack. And that's aversion, the third one. So it's either violent anger, irritation, annoyance, frustration. We say those words all day. You don't go to your therapist, oh, I got frustrated today. Shut up, Robina, go home. Until we have to have the wheels falling off, you see. But they're all the signs of attachment. But we don't pay attention. And then they build up. Because everything that goes in there stays there. So we build them all up. It builds up until one day the wheels do fall off. So attachment is a frantic. Fear is the nature of all delusion. As Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, when you have realized emptiness, when you've cut the root of all delusions, you have cut fear. We can't even conceptualize that in our culture. That sounds like a mad person. Fear is the natural taste of all delusions. It's its nature, because they're all the voices of ego grasping, of the root fantasy. They're all lies the mind has made up. So we live in a state of panic the whole time. Every second we're going to get what we want. That's the way to just to keep it steady. Get the cake, the thing, the comfort. Your body's unhappy, turn it over. Get this, fix it. All the time we're adjusting because we can't stand pain of any description. We can't stand discomfort. So all the time attachment is trying to get, comfort. Get the nice sound, the nice smell, the nice taste, the nice feeling. Frantic, frantic, frantic all the time. That's how we live our lives. So on top of that, if we can have a bit of love and compassion as well, phew, what a relief. So feeling, we either have pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings. That's it. Forget the neutral. And we can't stand the unpleasant feelings. Even the smallest one, even your leg's slightly painful, it's unbearable, isn't it? That's because of attachment. The slightest look by even a stranger in a shop, you get upset. That's because of attachment. The smallest thing goes wrong, it's because of attachment. It's just utterly pervasive, utterly. And this is the subtler level of suffering. The subtler. So the attachment, Buddha's got 2 points, he says, which we can prove quite quickly, to prove that that's a subtle level of suffering. So attachment believes when I get the cake in the mouth, not here. Don't try to put it here. We know which hole it goes in, that it will bring pleasure. It will trigger pleasure. That's it. So this is the point that Buddha's making, basically. He says samsara is, this is the point, that we all want happiness. He says that's fine, that's cool. But the only method we know to get happy feelings, to trigger happy feelings, is to get an object. That's it. So we're constantly trying to do that. But the tragedy is, Buddha says, we know, we prove it, and this is why he says it's not, the happiness is just superficial. Because, or they call it contaminated, or polluted, because it doesn't last. Now we know this, but it makes us so unhappy to hear it, we wonder why the hell Buddha's pointing it out. But it doesn't last. But part of the problem here is this. What we don't notice in our mind is another misconception, another delusion, another lie that's so ingrained, called grasping at things as permanent. I always quote Nicole Kidman. I love Nicole Kidman. I'm sorry, Nicole, to always quote you. When Tom Cruise left her. But before that, she said, I read an interview in the 90s when she was with him, and it was in Vanity Fair, and I read this interview. And she said, at the end of the interview, we will be together until we're 18. Now we know, if you know the news, you know that's not true. He left her, and then she married the Australian fellow. They now live in Tennessee and have 2 children. I read all the papers. What else is the papers? It's the world. It's the world I live in, isn't it? So anyway, and the names are Faith and Sunday. And she's Australian, you know that. So anyway, the point is this. Nicole being the example, I'm sorry, Nicole. Because she's like all of us. Attachment is a junkie for good feelings. So of course, when they came along, they even said they fell in lust. They joked and said they didn't fall in love, they fell in lust. So we understand that. Meaning each of them triggered very, very, very delicious feelings in the other. So of course that's called triggered by attachment. That's the bonus of attachment. It can trigger very delicious feelings. It doesn't mean they don't. That doesn't mean that the happiness is not real. It's very delicious. That happiness is happy feelings. Happiness is pleasant feelings, right? So we know the pleasant feelings that some objects can trigger. Astonishing, incredible happy feelings. Happy feelings are happy feelings, nothing wrong with them. But the method we use is to get an object. The method we use, and that's what attachment's job is this junkie to get the object. To get the object. And look how hard we have to work just to get an object, just for a moment. We will do, so what happens, another delusion in there, that is because we can't let's say she could not stand the thought of not having that object that triggered such happy feelings. Then you call it permanent, and you set it in stone. We will be together until we're 80. So it's literally a lie. Because it's happy, because we are happy now, we assume we'll be happy like this later. And then we extend it and say we'll be happy like this forever. We feel that, but that's a complete construct. We have made it up. And we believe it because it's unbearable to believe otherwise. That's what attachment does. We can't bear to be parted from the object. So we think it's permanent. So these lies we construct, and then this is and why we suffer is when we prove from our experience that they're lies. In fact, they weren't together until they're 80. Then we're devastated. Attachment, grasping at permanence, they all work together, you know. So the object, so the cake is a simple example. So there's something missing. Oh, what's missing? When you go, oh, cake. Attachment grabs onto it. And then the next one they talk about in the 12 links, they talk about we've got craving and then we have grasping, 8th and 9th links. And they're just different levels of attachment. So craving is one that thinks of the cake, and then grasping makes you get up and get it. So then the whole process is then imagining the object, but imagining the pleasure that will come at the end of the result of getting the object. Just have the object, just to have cake to look at is just not enough, is it? You've got to get in here. So then the story builds up and it's overinflating it, exaggerating it, distorting it, and it's also exciting, and the anticipation is much of the pleasure we have. Imagining the contact with the object is much of the pleasure. The excitement, the mind is completely blissing out at the excitement of getting the object, of contact with it. The cake, for example. You get the cake, and the first mouthful goes in. And it triggers deliciousness. There's no so attachment is the job that does the work to get it, that exaggerates the deliciousness. The eyes play their role. All the bits of our mind all play their role. And then everything is to get the pleasant feeling. You don't even put it in your mouth and then spit it out. You've got to swallow it, the habit. So where the pleasant feeling starts, I'm not sure. Because if it's pleasant feeling, in this case, the sense is called the tactile. It's called the tongue sense, not the stomach. But for some reason, we've got to go all the way down to the belly, isn't it? Because once you get past the tongue, it's too late now. It's all turned to cuck, isn't it? Yucca, kaka, isn't it? So it's curious. It's just the sensation of the tongue. But it seems more than that, doesn't it? It's very odd. So you're waiting for this pleasure to come. So pleasure is triggered. And it's the first mouthful that's the best. It's actually downhill from there. But we can't bear the thought of that. So, and this is the question. It did trigger pleasant feelings. That's a fact. And pleasure's fine. But why do we have to have another piece? Because we're not satisfied yet. So our trouble is, especially I know as a child, because I'm attached to food, and I am still, and I was then, I conflated satisfaction with a stuffed stomach. Do you understand? You eat till you're full. I remember one girl on one of those television shows, she was like 600 pounds, you know, little girl, 600 pounds. And Mummy, it was so profound what she said. The mother said, you know, she's always been this way. She never felt full. That's amazing. That's the point about attachment to food. Because the point the Buddha's making is satisfaction won't come. Because the millisecond, you've got the first mouthful in, and it does trigger pleasure, but because attachment's so violent, we're not happy. So you have to put the more mouthful in. And even as you're having it, you're anticipating the next one. I remember one boy I read about who was a junkie about girls, jumping on girls all day. As I'm having sex with one girl, he said, I'm anticipating the next one. One girl I read about who does Tinder, she said, oh, I was on the, you know, how easy it is to get sex now. As someone said to me recently, easy to just go online. It's not walking up and down streets anymore. What a hassle. Just go online, go click, boom. She said, oh, it's really convenient, but then it's a bit depressing after a while because she's just getting dressed and she looks over and he's on Tinder for the next one. That's how attachment works. It's never satisfied. It's a bottomless pit. We know this, but because we're junkies, it's hard to have control over the process. That's why I at least start with humility and control your body and leave the second piece on the plate and your hand in your lap. And live with the pain, the dissatisfaction. But we believe if I have the cake, it'll make me feel full. It'll make it go away. It'll make the pain go away. So a third mouthful, a fourth mouthful, a second piece. Until what happens? Until what happens? Until what happens? Satisfaction doesn't come. Full stomach comes. Acid reflux, constipation, getting fat, guilt. You understand what I'm saying? Now that was caused by what? The same thing that we thought would bring pleasure. But you know, tomorrow we forget all about the acid reflux. We just only think of the pleasure that we think we'll get, and off we go again, bashing our head against the same brick wall. Do we recognize all this? This is called science. This is called experience. So all I'm doing is giving Buddha's names to the different pieces. Not quite yet. This is the subtler level of suffering. Lama Zopa says, you've got renunciation, which is the conclusion of these first two wings. Sorry, the first two scopes, junior school and high school. You've got renunciation of suffering and its causes when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive, it's like using used toilet paper. Or another time he said, it's like being in a septic tank. So a long way to go. So we're not going to, it's going to be a long time before we start to be, you know, to start to see attachment as suffering. Like I say this mostly with conviction, but when I see the cake every time, I'm fooled by it, you know, because the habit is so deep. So it's going to be a long time before it goes. So we have to be very humble with ourselves. At least intellectually understand the process. Technically, what is attachment, what is feeling, what is this, what is that. It's a revelation. It's not how we analyze things. This is Buddha's analysis. It helps us at least understand the process. So attachment, Buddha says, is not only doesn't bring satisfaction, temporary, yeah, but it doesn't last. And we've got to ask, why do we want it to last? Well, obviously we want it to last. And not only does it not bring satisfaction, it actually brings more craving. As my mother used to say, I'd hear it. The more you get, the more you want. This is the real suffering of attachment. Now we know it's true, and we should be humble with ourselves, because it's a deep, we are all junkies, and I don't mean that lightly. If we've got attachment, we're junkies. It's a question of degree, and it's a question of the object. That's it. You know. This is the second kind of suffering. Are we communicating here? Now ask me some questions, please. Have some questions, yes.
When we go to cut, and like the cake is a really good example because it's a little bit simpler than
That's right.
everything else. When we go to cut that attachment of getting a second piece of cake or even finishing whatever piece, and you said something about like live with the pain of wanting more.
Go on.
What?
Say again, go on.
When we live with the pain of wanting.
Oh, okay. What I meant. Okay. What I meant. Yes.
How do we work that?
Yeah. It's
to transform.
Yes, darling. It's easy. But it's not, it's very hard for us. So what I mean is, what we have to do, given that attachment's a long time before it goes, so all we can do is chip away at it slowly, and knowing how it works, knowing the mechanics, know its relationship to feeling. These are very helpful things, you know, knowing the evolution of it. So at least even if we know that as we're doing it, we can be quietly analysing and observing it and not buying into the hysterical story that's running us, which is this greedy little kind of little thing in there. At least doing the analysis and being more skillful about it and observing it, that weakens the neurosis, that weakens the powerful negative karma. But still, then learn to at least enjoy, and then have the pleasure and enjoy it. That's a good thing. And then delight in it and get whatever pleasure does and delight and think of offering the pleasure. That already mitigates it. That's already, so you can have your cake and eat it too, to one degree or another. But the other one is, and I'll have you one piece, you know, or you two, whatever. But then the impulse is to have the third, the fourth, depends on whatever the object is. So then the courage we have to develop, and this is what's so hard, is when the craving comes, which is so intense that it's like especially when attachment is very strong. I remember when I'd be in love with people and you're really obsessed with the person. I can see why people kill when they're attached, when they're obsessed with the person. When you want to be close to the person and some obstacles are in the way and things go wrong and they're not there or the thing doesn't work, you're completely hysterical that you won't see the object, you won't have the person, you won't get to see the thing. So just with the cake, it's the same. So to learn to know that you won't go mad, you won't lose yourself, you won't go crazy, but to live with the pain of not having. That's what giving up being a junkie means. People talk about cold turkey. You suffer through it knowing you want to get past it. So you learn to recognize the craving of attachment and leave the hand in the lap, to analyze what's going on, to see the cake on the plate. Because one of the things about attachment is when you're really attached to the object, it's unbearable not to have it. It's like it's painful to see it on the plate and it's not in my mouth. It's like you can't resist, that's why we can't resist it. Do you understand? So then to just analyse, you won't lose anything by leaving it on the plate. And eat or be skillful, think, well, there are plenty more cakes out there tomorrow. But there's this frantic sense of loss. I mean, look at the people when you lose a person, you think you're dying because you've lost that person. So that's attachment wants to be close to the object, wants to touch or taste or smell or see the object. So living with the pain of that, knowing it will pass, and it's just living with the pain of it. Learning to live with that in your mind, but not that's why controlling your body and speech first is so powerful. Now, everybody who goes to AA knows this. That's why it's so wise. You say, I'm an alcoholic, but I won't touch it for 24 hours. You know the craving is there, but you control your body. And it's manageable by saying 24 hours. But it's painful. So we know when we fall off the wagon again, we're so devastated, because once you start, you just keep shoving it until you collapse again. So having the courage to know it's going to be there for a while, and knowing every time you feed it, you increase it, but knowing every time you don't feed it, you weaken it. But it's going to be there for a while, but still, even that's why alcoholics is good to say every 24 hours, I'm an alcoholic, but whatever you say if you're an alcoholic. I haven't, you go by 24 hours, don't you, the AA people?
One day at a time.
One day at a time, there you go. That's very powerful for the mind. And you learn not to be afraid of it, because fear is aversion. Attachment is a junkie that only wants nice feelings. As soon as it doesn't get what it wants, like not the cake and not the alcohol, then fear, aversion arises, but fear is its nature. Fear is panic. I won't have it. I mean, I remember the fear, when I was particularly attached to one person, it was like hysterical that I wouldn't see him. Literally hysterical. That's aversion. That's aversion and then fear that comes with it. It's very powerful. But recognize it's only the mind. It's only the mind. It's only the mind. So indeed it can be hard if you're going to have the shivers and the shakes. I know when I was a bit of an old hippie and I was into speed, I don't know what kind of drug it was. What if you're on speed, what would you call it, doctor? What would you call it? That's it. I used to take about 80 milligrams a day. I was like a maniac. My sister stayed at 7 and I went up to 80 because I was hungry and I was greedy. But I remember I thought, this is ridiculous. I can't. And I was also smoking 80 Marlboros a day in between the marijuana, So I just decided, well, I got to the limit of 80 fags a day. We call them fags in Australia. I realised it was just absurd. I couldn't go further. I mean, I went as far as I could go and I realised I couldn't go more than 80. Oh, this is ridiculous. Give it up, So I give it up. So I went off speed and I was in bed for a week having the shakes. I mean, I was really intense. It wasn't as much as heroin, no doubt, or even alcohol. It didn't last that long. But it was really intense. So that's an extreme example of the pain of not getting the object. So analysing it like this, attachment is just a construct that we've been having for a long time, which is why it's hard to resist it. And why is because we can't stand unhappy feelings. We only want nice feelings. We're like infants. We only want nice feelings. So we're going to be prepared to have unnice feelings and not know it won't make us crazy. Do you understand? And the thing is, okay, yeah. Many more about that. I want to go more deeper level of all these delusions, talk about how they're all conceptual stories. Yeah. And then keep your hands up. I'll go in a minute. Go.
Robina, would you perhaps talk a little bit about how attachment can contaminate a spiritual practice? Sort of
is a particular important in general, it contaminates all of our happiness and all of, attachment to getting pleasure and things and objects just means you just don't do your practice. And it counteracts the virtues. Speaking simply, spiritual practice is practicing love, kindness, patience, renunciation, generosity, understanding emptiness, etc. So there's attachment, then that goes out of the way. So it's very simple. It prevents us from developing our virtues, which is what a spiritual practice is. Clearly it does. Clear.
I'm thinking of like the tendency to take a bunch of empowerments because in import lamas.
Oh, you mean attachment to spiritual practice itself? Oh, okay, I see, yeah.
The way it comes
No,
into
yes, no, that's very not uncommon as well. Because naturally, you see, one of the things about attachment, we get excited, isn't it? So you could argue, this is your question, why your question back there is sort of important. Because we have got attachment, it will come into our spiritual practice, inevitably. So especially if you have a spiritual practice and you sit and meditate and you get good feelings. I mean, I'm glad I've never had good feelings in meditation, because you become a junkie and you think, oh now, because you see, we conflate good feeling when it's done in meditation with spiritual. Excuse me, good feelings are good feelings. So I know, I can think of, this is one point, I can think of some people, I know one person I know who came to a class in Queensland and she started just doing Tara meditation and she got bliss. Now this can happen in the mind because you've got some past karma with meditation, you trigger some aspect and it generates bliss. Bliss is a very excited, nice, good feeling. That's all it is. It's just the outer end of good feelings. And that's perfectly valid and you get that all the time when you really realise. But she triggered this capacity to feel very good bliss. So she thought that was a spiritual experience. So she was like a little vampire doing Tara meditation all the time because she wanted the good feelings. Well, that's completely, it just destroys anything so-called spiritual. It's just treating it like junkie. Or people who, attachment can then greedily want all these things and all this and all these teachers and all these initiations, all this stuff, or even do all our practices, and then because it's so extreme, the bubble bursts and then we collapse and it all goes away. Is that what you mean? I mean, I remember one woman who came to one of our centres who had, you know, Rinpoche, within it, she took Yamataka initiation, she did the retreat, and she was like blissed out for like weeks. It was quite remarkable to see it. And Lama Zopa made her the centre director. In a month, she gave up the job and gave up everything. Because all this attached, so he grabbed her to make her create some virtue, though, by being the centre director. Another people, two people I know became monks. Rinpoche, they went up to see his, they liked the Dharma, they went to Kopan and he saw them and he called them up, he said, you become a monk now. 3 months later he gave up everything, all the Dharma, everything. So my sense is because he's clairvoyant, the Lamas, he gets him to make some merit before he's going to give it all up, you know. So this woman, he knew she wouldn't last. But she created some merit of doing the director. Do you understand? So the attachment plays a massive role. Of course it does in our spiritual practice, because, you know, you've got a karmic connection with doing something that's called killing, so attachment is the problem, and you've got a karmic connection with something doing called practice, which is not to do with attachment, but our attachment goes into it very easily. Of course it does, of course it does, of course it does. So we have to be very wise about it and recognise it. You know?
So the link between attachment and ego, if I am practicing Dharma at a certain level and I think, oh, if I do this, it'll make me a special Dharma practitioner.
Yeah, well, that's now called pride, and the other one called, what the deeper attachment I want to get to now in a minute, I was going to before, but I'll do it later, is attachment to reputation. Attachment to being seen as special. Attachment, yeah, that's a massive one. We'll go into that later, not now. That's the worst attachment we have, the deepest one and the hardest to go. We'll go into that later. We're talking about the obvious level here, which is the sensory one. But that's to do with reputation as well as arrogance. The sense of who you think you are. You know, that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
It really struck me when you were speaking about how important it is to develop fortitude to deal with unpleasant feelings.
Yes, that's
instead of
right.
always reaching for attachment.
Precisely, that's right.
Because in my experience, I experienced like a low-level hum of dissatisfaction in my life. Like,
that's normal, but you're seeing it, that's all. That's
right.
Normal. That's how we all are.
And it's like, even though I know attachment is a lie, I'll do anything to make that feeling stop.
Precisely.
And it's
that's how deep the pain, and that's showing the pain of it. That's how we are. That's how we are. So to learn to live with the thought, the seemings, the unhappy feelings, that's really a profound level of progress in practice. Because the junkie in us can't bear it. We're like babies. This is how we are. And that's why we're up and down like yo-yos. You know. That's right. Exactly. So that's where, when we get to the Bodhisattva path, and they now talk about the 8 worldly dharmas, this weird phrase, you know. It's basically a subtler, more nuanced, more primordial level of how attachment really does pervade our lives. And this is this attachment. Now we're getting to it. So this is the much more fundamental level of it. Forget the individual ones of that sense object or this sense object. Here it's much more it's more general but more specific as well. So this 8 are 8 different ways that attachment works. So that they're in 4 pairs. So then the usual one of attachment is always, so it's attachment, the first lot is always wanting happy feelings. So here I am sitting here, let's say, and it's relatively, the temperature is relatively nice in here, isn't it? It's fairly reasonable, you're not too hot, you're not too cold, so therefore we don't think about it, but it's pleasant. Now the moment you go out there and it's either freezing cold or it's boiling hot, instantly attachment is not instantly aversion takes over, doesn't it? Because attachment now gets something it doesn't want. So what attachment does there is now kick in to being free of the unpleasant feeling. So attachment's always there. So if a pleasant feeling is there, attachment wants it to stay. And if unpleasant feeling is there, attachment is now attached to making it go away. So you can't wait to you're anticipating getting to your car where the AC is. Or you're anticipating get to your cozy house where the heater is on. And every second you're walking, you're kind of looking forward to that. So one of the functions of attachment is always looking forward to something. So this never stops. We're either attached to keeping the good feeling and getting it to happen, or we're attached to being free of the unpleasant feeling. And it's unceasing. It pervades our day. And that's attachment to comfort. And that's when we get older, especially when you don't care much about sex, drugs and rock and roll, you just want comfort. I mean, and we're so used to getting comfort in our culture. You know, when you go, in the last 3 years we've been, I forgot I did my advertisements. I left my postcards behind. I'll give you some postcards. I lead a trek the last 3 years up to Laudo, Lama Yeshe's cave up in the mountains. Sherpa, he's a Sherpa. He was recognised as a reincarnation of this Laudo Lama, this Lama Yeshe, this great yogi, Nyingma yogi in the past life. So this life he was born there as a very small boy, and born there, then lived as a small boy, and then left and everything, blah, blah, whatever. So the point is, it's really tough up there, really basic. It's 10 below Celsius when it's freezing cold in the winter, really basic conditions. And I've never walked up, first of all, just walked up a mountain. I've never walked up even a hill in my life. I just don't like walking. I'm bored by the bush, you know. I always say, I'm happy the trees are there, but I don't care if I don't see them. It's true. So I was happy the mountains are there, and I kept looking at the mountains, so aren't they amazing? And they are amazing, but I wasn't excited, you know. So I went because I wanted to leave the group to raise money for Mache's place, so I was happy to do it. But it was like every inch was hell. Do you understand? It was just plain hell. I mean, I'm happy to see mountains, but I just see a movie. I'm happy with a mountain. I don't get to go ooh-ah about mountains or even the bush. All I could feel was the unpleasantness of the body, the unpleasant feelings. All I was upset. Every single step was an effort. Every single step. And you get there, and you finally don't have to walk up any more hills, but it's now freezing cold, you know. So all you was thinking of going into the house where the heater is on. It's the only place where there's a fire. So all the time your mind is obsessed. And you try, so then this is really when we start to practice. And that's when we're getting equilibrium, when our mind is steady, whether the weather's nice or not nice, the food is ugly or not ugly, the words are nice or not nice. This is really the proof of the pudding that we're making progress. But living with it, but accepting it, and then not being afraid of it. And that's what the power is, not to be afraid of it. Because fear is the nature of all these delusions. You know? This is really a sign of progress. Control your body, control your speech, and then control your mind. But not to expect it. Part of our suffering is we think it shouldn't be there. Because, I've been practicing all these years, I should be better by now. That's one of the worst crimes against ourselves. That's a misconception. That's also dissatisfaction, assuming we should be better than we are. So we have to recognize where we are and then learn to be content with that. We have to practice being content, which means we have to say the words. It's fine having a headache. It's okay. I mean, if we can get a pill, that's fine. But if you can't make it go away immediately, you can't get the cold weather immediately fixed, then you learn to accept it. And that's the most powerful level of practice. That's giving up attachment. It's putting atomic bombs on attachment every second. It's very, very powerful. Do you understand? So the next pair of attachments is about always attached to getting things and then attached to being free of not getting things. But the next two are the killers. And they're all often the Lamas talk about them in different ways. But the next two is we're constantly attached to hearing pleasant words with our name in them. And then attached to being free of unpleasant words with our name in them. And the next two, my feeling is, I mean, these are very linked. And these two seem very similar. But this, the last lot, this, they say, is the deepest attachment, the most primordial, that it's so shocking to hear that it's even a delusion in the first place. And this is the last one to go. And they call it attachment to reputation. But speak it really simply, it's the craving to be liked by other people. It's the belief that I'm nothing unless someone says I'm something. It's the craving to be seen in a good light. And I swear to you, this starts the second we're born. In other words, this is the main symptom of the ego grasping, this dualistic view of a separate, lonely, bereft, nothing, concrete me. Then the assumption at this level of attachment is that I'm not anything until someone says I'm something. That's how deep this is. And my sense is in our culture, our psychological models, we are seen in these terms. We're seen as social beings, and we can only become socialized, we can only become a proper person by being socialized, in reference to others. That's why if you say to a typical, our modern psychological model, people, like you, a psychiatrist or a therapist, a typical person in our culture who isn't Buddhist, that you talk about a person going off to the mountains for 6 months to meditate. We don't know what they're doing. It just sounds demented to us, because what are they doing sitting in their own mind? That sounds to us like mental illness, because you've got to be a real person in reference to others. Do you see what I'm saying, people? So this need for us to be seen, approved of by other people all the time, it's being liked by people. Why do you think we're lonely? Think about loneliness. Think about it. You're sitting there with all your own thoughts, and there's no one who's hearing your thoughts. So why is it that we think that our thoughts are somehow worthless until someone else hears them? I mean, if they're so worthless, why share them? So we have this yearning that someone has to hear my thoughts. That's what loneliness is, and that's attachment to reputation. And that's the disease we all have. Can you hear it? And it's every second in the mind we're adjusting ourselves to analysing. Every second we're with other people, we're adjusting our behaviour to check that they're responding nice to us and make sure that we did the right thing, say the right thing. And every second we're on our own, we're trying to think of telling people and telling our experiences and sharing them. We call it sharing. We make it sound nice. Compassion and helping others, that's fantastic. But this is completely I-based. And it's very, very depressing and very suffering. So Buddha's basically saying everything we are already is here. We have to validate it. We have to become it. Then when we share with others, it's divine. Because it's not based on attachment. Are we communicating, people? Attachment pervades our lives. It's true. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking of what the people in the village are thinking about them. That's this one. We live our mind. You wash your mind every day. This one is so pervasive we don't notice it until we start really looking. And it's much harder to see than attachment to sex and drugs and rock and roll. It's this constant voice in the head about others, thinking of others seeing me, or especially if you live with people, you're always thinking of what they think of you, what they're doing, and how in reference to them, what they think of what they, this and that. And if you're coming home from work, something bad happened, you're telling on the road, you're talking to yourself, you can't wait to get home to tell your hubby. Everything is in reference to telling other people. So we pour it out of our mouths. Other people have to know it. Then it becomes real. And there's no thought to us, and we just accept it, we have an experience, and we leave it there. You call kind of secretive if you do that. We need to be approved of. Even if the other person's a peanut, just like you. That's why I think in relationships, sex relationships, why initially it's so blissful is because someone is looking at you like you're a goddess. And that is the most divine attachment to reputation, getting what it wants. It's like better than the best thing in the universe. When you're being seen, when someone looks at you with loving eyes as if you're the most divine person, this is so unbelievable. I think sex has got nothing to do with that. And even when he leaves me, the most devastating suffering is not because he doesn't want to have sex with me, because he doesn't want to look at me anymore. Suddenly he doesn't see this divine person anymore. That's attachment to reputation, I'd say. Are you seeing what I'm saying, people? Compassion for others and hearing them and having empathy, that's different. That's virtue. We're talking about the junkie in here. That's why controlling our speech. But we really do call it sharing. When we're with a person you're attached to, you just, everything, you download each other's stuff every single day. There's nothing that you don't talk to each other about, because you just have to have someone else hear it. And it is very pleasing to have that person to hear it. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's right. That's a massive attachment. But just to have an experience and not have to share with everybody. It sounds like to us like we're being mean, you know. And that's why we get lonely, because there's no one to do it with. Therefore, I must be a worthy person. I mean, it's quite a shocking set of assumptions, really. And all these are assumptions deep in our bones that we've had for a long, long time. You know. Are we communicating here? Any questions about this one? Or anything? No? Where? Yes, sweetheart. Go to both of you. Back, behind there. Hang on. You at the back. Go, darling.
So the cake is like not inherently good or bad.
That's right.
But so can you eat it in a virtuous way?
Of course you can, yes. Of course you can. Of course you can, darling. This is the whole point. That's why Lama Zopa, for example, never stops. I mean, he knows we're not going to get much renunciation. He's not going to bother telling us to give a cake up or only have one piece. I mean, he doesn't go on about that. But he, basically, if we understand, okay, if every thought we have sows a seed, and if there's mainly attachment there, then you're sowing heavy, never get a seed. You don't want that. So why not, before you shove the cake in the mouth, have a virtuous thought. Think of it as empty. Think of it as offering it to other people. Think just even for a few seconds of offering it to others. You just put a whole bunch of very powerful thoughts in your mind, and then you eat it. Then you've changed the dynamic of that entire action. So it's really powerful, really very powerful. But we have to have the, that's why even when you take refuge, one of our commitments is to, before we shove the cake in the mouth or the drink in the mouth, you just think of a little, you offer it to the three jewels. It's a very powerful way to give up attachment. It's a very powerful practice, actually. Just before you put the food in the mouth, you know, bless it, do whatever you like, but just think of, even just thinking of others enjoying it, offering it to others, is stupendous. That weakens the neurosis. Do you understand? Very powerful. Of course, yes. And that's how you bring the compassion wing into your daily life. And that can help. There's one way of working with attachment, just give it up. That's the first level, very fundamental, it's a very powerful level, it's very excellent, we need it. The other way is add compassion on top. So if you're going to have sex, you know, for example, then add some love and compassion and generosity in there. Don't just do it because you feel like it. Maybe you don't feel like it, but your beloved wants you, loves you. Excuse me, I'm not trying to be personal here, but think about it. Then out of generosity and kindness, love them. That's a very powerful action. I mean, we only do things that give us pleasure when we feel like it, which is self-centered. And that's why we only, when we're attached to somebody, we'll do whatever we like because it gives us such pleasure. But do it for the other person's sake. That's very profound. You might want a meal, but first he's invited me out, I'll go for a meal. It's for her sake. That makes it very profound. And that can really counteract attachment. You've got to be wise to do that. Do you understand? Yeah.
So can you talk to like feeling versus function? I may be using the wrong word, but if I feel hungry, and this might actually be just in English way of saying, because in my language we don't say I feel hungry.
What do you say?
So.
What do you say in your language?
Just that I'm hungry. With no.
Not the word feeling.
Nah.
Okay, fine. Good.
So,
okay.
Hungry for me is like a function, right? It's
what, sorry?
It's neutral.
What is?
Hungry.
What do you mean by neutral?
In that it's a function of the body.
It's what?
I don't know, I'm just, for me it's not a bad or good thing.
You mean there's no attachment, you don't have attachment to food, you mean?
Yeah.
You mean you don't have attachment for food?
In that sense, yeah.
There's no attachment to food? You don't think of food when it's not there, you don't crave to have it, you don't care?
Well, that's my question, is there a difference?
You have to see the difference, of course there is, you have to see the difference. Well, of course there is, you have to see the difference. Of course there is, darling. I mean, of course there is, there's a massive difference, and most of us are attached to food. And so then we often think, well, I'm eating because I've got to get healthy. But if you didn't have attachment to food, you'd have to be reminded to eat. You'd never think of food, ever. One of the signs of attachment is it's in your mind all the time. You look at food for most of us, you think of it before you have it, after you have it, while you're having it, preparing for the next one, buying it, shipping it, having this one, that one, nutrition, this, blah, blah, blah. We never end. So then, of course, your body, if we only ate, I mean, I've checked for me, my type of, I've got very low metabolism. And if I've lost weight, I've had to eat 500 calories or less. And I've tested it, because I never get hungry. I don't have actual physical hunger. Even if I fasted, my body gets a bit weird, but I just have attachment to food. So I eat out of attachment, so I've got to control it. But my body doesn't ever care. I need very little food to be nourished, very little food. I can have a meal every 2 days, I'll be fine. But I eat because I'm attached to food, so there's a big difference. You have to distinguish the difference. Some people have, I remember I met one girl who she ate like 3 times, she was as skinny as a rake, and she ate 3 times, the amount that a 6-foot man would eat, because she just had this ravenous need for food all the time. It was quite suffering. Quite extraordinary, actually. Physically. So we've got to know the difference. We've got to know our minds. That's why we conflate as children. I would eat until I felt stuffed, because I knew I wanted satisfaction, but the only way to equate it was when you couldn't eat any more. And that's just kind of ridiculous. Do you understand? There's a massive difference. Of course there is. And if you're really high yogis, you don't even need food. You can live on the air. The great meditators can just live on, extract the essence from the air. Yes, I really.
Yes, there is attachment between the mother and the baby.
Yes, that's right.
The baby and the mother.
That's right.
And that's essential to survive.
That's the Western view of putting it, but not the Buddhist analysis. That is the Western view, and I understand your point, but if we do the analysis using these definitions here, we can talk about it differently.
Right. That's why I would like to come up with a different word than attachment.
Okay, go.
So, using the same word, I would tend to think that there is healthy attachment.
No, I understand. You hear His Holiness and other people talk that way, but what I want to do is really be constantly clear about how attachment's a poison, and not use it like that. So let's use it differently. So the attachment function in the mother is, there's various things going on. Your consciousness, at the time of your past death, the karmic seed was triggered that caused you to go to your mummy's womb. So you've got, obviously, they would say, you've got a very strong history with that woman. Very powerful karmic connection. You've been her mother many times, you've done good things for her many times. So here you are, now got the karma to run to her womb. So was your mummy attached to you? Didn't your mummy adore her little boy? Like mummies do. So that means there's various things. You've got a strong history with you, very strong karmic history from many lifetimes. We'll take that as an assumption here. And the attachment is to see that her Aurelio is the most divine little boy since the universe began, and all mothers say that. But also there's love and compassion there. Was she loving and compassionate as well? So that's the saving grace. So you can see some mothers who don't have much love and compassion, then they're the ones who kill their babies. So it's love and compassion that nurtures you and looks after you, but because there's attachment there, because she wants to touch you all the time and look at you all the time and hear you all the time, well, just as well, I joke and I say, I'm glad my mother thought I was divine, because she would have killed me otherwise. So the attachment makes you look delicious and she wants to be near you all the time, but it's love and compassion that causes her to get up at night, in the middle of the night when she's tired, and put up with you and all of that. And if that's missing, then she's in trouble. Can you see the difference? So attachment is very delicious. It makes the child look divine and heavenly, and you can't stop thinking about them, loving them, looking at them. And then the pain of when you grow up and you start doing what she doesn't want, that's the pain of the mothers, when you do what her attachment doesn't want. So it's the cause. So the pain, but the good qualities in your mother's mind are love, compassion, kindness, and all that. They're the stuff that are worthwhile. But so this is the point. At the moment, given that we're ordinary people with attachment, try and imagine having a child, and some people have this, whom you have no attachment for. To try and imagine, to try and love that person every day, it's like bringing a stranger into your house, or bringing an enemy into your house and trying to be kind to them. It's really hard. So it helps to be attached. At least you don't kill the child. You see what I'm saying, people? I mean, look at the mothers who don't have any, some mothers don't have attachment for their children. You hear about that. Of course, the world thinks we're evil because we think it is some kind of blood thing. No, it's karma, the Buddhist view. You see what I'm saying? There's quite a difference, So this is where we would really get, we have to talk about this now, or what time is it? What time we go? 4:30? Okay. Where it's really hard to distinguish between attachment and love. Especially the mother. Oh my God, especially the mother. Probably the father too, but the mother, Because love and attachment are completely, for us, are completely intertwined. They're mixed together like milk and water. So attachment is the over-exaggeration of your deliciousness. And then the defending of you. When I was always naughty, because we had difficulties in our family, there were dramas, my father wasn't so cool, and different things happened. So she would always overcompensate for my naughtiness. You understand? Poor Robina, And she'd actually end up doing things that weren't even good for me. Because I was lazy, I wouldn't do my homework, so she thought, poor Bobsy, she called me Bobsy, so she did my homework for me. And then I got into trouble one time when she wrote a poem, and I didn't know the meaning of a word in the poem. I was supposed to have written it. She thinks she's helping me, but that's not helping, that's called, because I was just plain lazy, But she'd overcompensate and try and support me. Even when I did things wrong, she'd defend me. That's what attachment causes you to do. So it's not good for the person. Attachment actually stops you from helping the person. You think it's love, but love and attachment are completely different. It's very hard to see the difference. So love is altruistic. Love is for the sake of the other person. Love is the source of your happiness. Love makes, is realistic. Attachment, I-based, fear-based, panic-stricken, distorted, delusional. But given that we've got it, then at least if your mum has attachment and she's got love, then it's okay, I mean, better than nothing. Are you with me, people? Are you with me?
Perhaps we could think of attachment as a vehicle.
A what?
A vehicle, like the raft.
I understand. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very good way to talk about it if you think of the Vajrayana. It is that. Definitely is that. And that's why, but you see, the first level of practice, the junior school, entry level, grade 1, junior school, Theravadan level, Hinayana level, that's where there's not much wiggle room. Just be strict, don't kill, don't lie, don't jump too many partners, don't do this, don't do that, and give up attachment. You've got to do that as a ground. And then as you progress, like in the beginning there, you just got to leave the chocolate cake on the plate. Once you've controlled your body, speech and mind, you really have understood attachment and you've got it under control, now you can go to the compassion wing and you could argue, you could eat a piece of cake for the sake of others. It won't make you crazy. And by the time you get to Vajrayana, you actually consciously eat the cake because you're able to utilize the energy that it triggers. It's a much more advanced level. So it is a vehicle. Even in the ordinary bodhisattva level, given that you've got it, at least be attached to something that's useful to you. Be attached to good friends. But recognize what attachment is. Don't get fooled by it. Because it's a long way to go before you get rid of it. Recognizing that makes us very humble. And don't get fundamentalist with yourself. Oh, I'm so attached. Yes, you are. Join the club.
So you can use it as a vehicle.
As you understand it more, you can be more skillful.
You can
Exactly.
love and compassion.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. That's right. So if you're going to want a relationship, be attached to a person who will help you be more virtuous. If you're going to have a job, be more attached to a job that is not going to harm people, will help people. It's skillful means, but don't pretend it's not attachment, but know it, because the more you know it, you can see it, and you can work with it, and you can deconstruct it, and then it's more powerful. Do you understand, people?
And you leave the raft once you get to
Yeah,
the
once you
other
get,
side.
you don't need it anymore. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But the irony is the only person who can use attachment who's got some deeper, who's already given up to some degree. That's the point. And the greatest tantric yogis are the ones who can actually use it. They've given it up completely. That's the point. Give up the neurotic aspect of it. What else, people?
I have a question.
Where?
Will you take
Yes,
that?
is it a proper question? Serious, proper, thought-out question.
Hopefully.
Let's just hear it. And keep it simple.
I'll keep it very simple. So for 8 worldly dharmas we spoke about when we were removed.
Yeah.
The third and the fourth.
Bit louder, darling.
The third and the fourth one.
Yeah.
Fame and disgrace.
That's right. What about yes?
And
Go on.
then reputation and.
Yeah, go on.
So what's the difference between the two?
Sounds. It's attachment to hearing someone praise you as opposed to criticize you is one, and then attachment to just generalized wanting to be seen and heard and verified as a person.
So one is a short term, one is a long term.
I can't hear you, darling.
One is for a short term.
No, it's more. The sound one is more moment by moment. We're craving to hear. When people are talking about it, we can't bear to be. We know we can't bear to be criticised. It's like a dagger in the heart, isn't it? As soon as someone seems to indicate that criticises us, then we hurt by those words. We want to hear the deliciousness when someone praises us. So we just can't wait to hear it. But the other one is a generalised. They're both there, but just general assumption that I've got to have people be. I've got to be seen. And seen as a nice person, to have a reputation around friends and people. They've got to know, that's the one. It's more broad, I'd say, and it's deeper to ego grasping. I'd say it's the deepest one to ego grasping.
But both of them are attached to the I, the self.
Huh?
Both of them are attached to I.
No, it's not a question. No, that's not the point here. No, that's not true.
That's not true.
Because of ego grasping, the craving, the belief in an intrinsic me, there is attachment to get what I want. And in this case, to get nice words and or to get good reputation. That's the way to put it.
That's true.
Yeah. To reinforce the fantasy I. Attachment is the main voice of I, the fantasy I. Because when you've stopped believing in the fantasy I, you've given up attachment. There's no fantasy any longer. You're fulfilled now, you're whole. There's no separate sense of me and blah blah, rubbish. That's right. This is Buddhist psychology, okay? This is Buddhist psychology. If we study it, don't study it, how can you do it? You can't. You don't know the names of these words, you can't define them. If you don't know what a feeling is, don't know what happy feeling, sad feeling, this one, you don't know what delusion is, don't know what virtue is, don't know what mental consciousness, don't know what sensory consciousness. If you can't learn the terms and the definitions, like anything you learn, how can you learn it? How can you know it? You can't. It's simple. So because you like Buddhism doesn't mean you know Buddhism. It's a big difference. Buddhism is very specific, you can see it. The definitions, the terms are very specific. Yeah. What else, people? So we've touched on the essence of the junior school and high school, the wisdom wing, karma and the mind. Karma is junior school, mind is high school. This is the essence of the work that you do to get renunciation. It's the essence of the work you do to get renunciation, to become this marvelous person. This is the method to become this marvelous, grounded, self-confident, wise, content person. This is the method. This is the methods. This is the method. Now you can go to, to compassion wing. We'll do that more tomorrow. Because if you can't if you don't understand yourself, how can you understand others? In fact, let's look at that already now in the framework of the compassion wing, like we talked a bit before. So okay, compassion wing, the essence of all the virtuous state. In the first level of practice, we're trying to first control the body and speech, which are the servants of the crazy mind, the delusions. Then we start to look at the delusions themselves. And let's look at even these two, attachment and aversion. And then the other dramas, jealousy, pride, arrogance, low self-esteem, this kind of stuff, getting some understanding of them. So when you understand these and control your body and speech, this is the method, working with this stuff day by day, is the method for becoming this marvelous person. So therefore you begin to understand suffering, the first kind of suffering, the suffering of suffering, which is when the bad things happen. The causes of it are harming others, so you stop that in junior school. And the second kind of suffering is the suffering of change, which is the suffering of having attachment. And you start to understand what Buddha's saying. He's basically saying, you know what, you people? We all want happiness. We all want suffering. There's nothing wrong with that. That's reality. In fact, the whole way of framing Buddhism is in terms of that. We all want happiness. We all don't want suffering. And all he's saying is, you know what, guys? Your methods don't work. He's not being moralistic. He's not being mean. He's simply saying they don't work. You've got a misconception. You have a wrong analysis. He says, you know what? I found a method to how to get happiness and to stop suffering, which is what we want anyway, which is why we're trying to get things. So basically it's like this. Quite shocking. We think happiness, happy feelings, are what we get when we get what attachment wants. That's our method. That's it. He says, no, you got it wrong. Happy feelings are what you get when you give up attachment. It's as simple as that, but as hard as that. That's it. So I said, even when you get some single point of concentration, just looking at Lama Yeshe's book on Mahamudra, and Rama's marvelous. Lama tried to get always excited. He tried to get us encouraged. They normally in the text don't go on about all the marvelous qualities of a person who has single point of concentration. But he talks about it. They're extraordinary just to get single point of concentration. Forget about actually working on your delusions. You'd have bliss. He says the words rapture, ecstatic bliss. He uses those words. That's literally the capacity of our mind to the degree, even temporarily, that it is free of delusions. This is logical, natural stuff. But we think happiness is what you get when you get the object. And you listen to it, it's really tragic. We don't have any other method. The only method we have to trigger even a moment of some pleasure is to get an object. It's exhausting. We are exhausted from the work. And it doesn't last. And then it turns into suffering feelings. It turns into the first kind of suffering. So it's like so brutal. We've been bashing our heads against brick walls for eons, Buddha says, and we just don't get the learning. So Lama talks about the qualities that you'd have. This bliss, this utter control over every single thought. Your body's like a feather. You'd have clairvoyance, you see the past, you see the future, you're an astonishing person. And the Buddha says we've had this countless lifetimes, but we lost it. Because we didn't realize emptiness, you know. So giving up the first kind and second kind of suffering, that's renunciation. That's the junior school and high school. That, you are the recipient of the benefits of all that. You become this marvelous, blissful, wise, kind, radiant, joyful, stable, self-confident person. Not neurotic, not up and down like yo-yos. Brave, marvelous. Think of all the positive words. That's what you'll become by doing junior school and high school. When we read the text, it doesn't sound like that. They sound very fundamental. It's got to give up something all the time. It sounds depressing, you know. So then the compassion wing, you don't stop the job. You continue to work on your mind. That never changes from here to Buddhahood. But now the reference point is other sentient beings. The first lot, you're playing safe and keeping away from harming them. The second time, now we continue to work on our mind, but now it's in reference to breaking down the barriers that ego grasping has constructed that separate us from others. You know? So you continue to work, the emphasis in the compassion wing isn't just running around like being like Mother Teresa helping people. The compassion wing is continuing to work on your mind, continuing to lessen delusions. So the reference point here for the main problem is called self-cherishing or selfishness. The main problem in the first level is called attachment, but they're both the same. There's different ways of framing them. So because of attachment, we then put self first. So the emphasis here is we're trying to make this paradigm shift on the compassion wing to put others first. So even these discussions about compassion I find just so intense because there's such high levels of compassion. They're like too much, you know, for our minds. We've got to really understand the meaning. So what's compassion? What's the definition? It's a conceptual story. Like all the others, are all conceptual stories. Attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, this, that, they're all conceptual stories. You're an ugly person, it's an opinion. That's a nice cup, it's an opinion. I hate you, it's an opinion. You're the cause of all my suffering, it's an opinion. They're all viewpoints, they're all conceptual stories. Some have lots of emotion involved. So virtuous thoughts are also conceptual stories. But they're valid. And why they're valid is because they're in sync with reality. This is the reference point for Buddha. The basis for whether a conception is valid or not is there a referent object of it. So attachment is a liar that inflates the value of the cake. So it's an invalid conception. Attachment I keep calling him Trevor or Neville. What's his name? Fidel. He's not Trevor, he's not Neville. Trevor, Neville, Fidel, okay. Attachment for Neville makes Neville look, not Neville, Trevor, not Trevor, Fidel, look more delicious than he really is. We know that one. Like your baby, it is convenient sometimes to see them that way. Which blinds you from seeing the truth that his ex-girlfriend told me that I think she's a load of rubbish. No, she's just bitter because he doesn't love her anymore. But you can't see the other things. Attachment blinds you. That's why attachment as a parent blinds you from seeing the problems in the child. You don't want to see them, you know, so you can't be helpful. So aversion over-exaggerates his ugliness and then forget all his good qualities. So they're both inflated. They both lie in their inflations. That's their main function. That's why they're called delusions. Virtues, love for Fidel is a delight in my mind when he's happy. And Mummy's had that, absolutely. A delight in his happiness, wanting him to be happy, and then doing the hard work of knowing his mind enough to help him be happy. That's wisdom. And then, so love is, the definition of love is a thought, it starts with a thought, may you be happy. Wanting him to be happy. And then think the higher level is what can I do to make him happy? That's the bodhisattva level. And then compassion, to flip it over, is oh my God, look at that suffering. May he not suffer. That's compassion. And then the great compassion of the bodhisattvas, what can I do to take away the suffering? So these are trying to grow these. You already have these by lessening delusions, but you've got to now enhance these by practicing on the compassion wing, growing them hugely. So what we're trying to do on the compassion wing, the end result of the renunciation is the first result of the first two strokes. The essence of the result here is bodhicitta. bodhicitta, awakening thought, technically in Sanskrit. It's got two parts. It's the thought that it's only, once you've got this bodhicitta, which is so high it's unbelievable, your only job is to benefit whoever's in front of you. Whoever's in front of you, they're your job to fix, to help in one way. And the long-term part of bodhicitta is you're going to never give up to become a Buddha as long as it takes, because then you're qualified to help them all. So it's like this drive, they're like these maniacs, these bodhisattvas, driven by this long-term wish. Based upon great compassion, based on love, great love, based on all the others, coming down to the starting point, which is called equanimity. So there's all these different techniques over the centuries. You know, the great yogis, the Tibetans have used, passed on from the Indians. And there's two main techniques for cultivating this bodhicitta. This paradigm shift where now others are more important than you. And this is hard to say in our culture because it just sounds weird, you know. Because in our culture we assume the validity of attachment and neuroses is a valid part of a reasonable person. It's a bit hard to hear this view. So there's two different techniques. One is called the 7 causes and 6 causes and 1 effect or something, and one's called the exchanging self for others. And there's a third method that combines both. It's got 11 little points. The first one is called equanimity, and it culminates. These culminate in bodhicitta. Let's even look at a couple of these, and we'll go into these in more detail tomorrow. So equanimity already is powerful. There are different ways of using this word equanimity in Buddhism. In the junior school and high school level, at the renunciation part, equanimity is related to your own mind when it's more steady, not up and down like a yo-yo, you understand? You've got more equanimity within yourself, more stable. But here equanimity is in relation to sentient beings. And here this equanimity such that if you had it, what it would be this heartfelt recognition that friend, enemy and stranger, and there's no fourth category on this planet. These are the objects of the 3 poisons, the 3 toxic emotions, ignorance, attachment and aversion. So the objects of these in terms of sentient beings are friend, object of attachment, enemy, object of aversion, and stranger, object of one aspect of ignorance. Friend, enemy, stranger. So equanimity is a heartfelt recognition that enemy, friend and stranger are the same as each other from one point of view. They each equally wish to be happy, and they each equally wish not to suffer. That's essentially exactly this equanimity. It doesn't just a vague idea they're all the same, it's just too wishy-washy. It's very precise. So what's the benefit of that, and why would we think it? What's the point? This is the starting point of growing all these other points that culminate in love and compassion and bodhicitta. And what it's doing is shifting the logic for why you want people to be happy and why you want them not to suffer. That is to say, it's shifting the logic for why you love people, which is may you be happy, and why you have compassion for people, which is why may you not suffer. It's the logic now is ego's logic, which of course is no logic at all. And that is, I love my beloveds. I love the objects of my attachment. And that means I want them to be happy. I don't want them to suffer. But I do not love the ones, the objects of my aversion, and I couldn't care less about the strangers. And this is the universe. Monkeys and dogs and ants and humans all do the same thing. We have friends, enemies and strangers. It's utterly normal. And this is because we have the 3 poisons, the three toxic emotions. So the objects of attachment are what we call friend. So as long as that friend does what I want, does what my attachment wants, and it sounds very brutal, but it is how it is. As long as Fidel fulfills my attachment, we have a good relationship, he does what I want, we're nice to each other. There's nothing wrong with a relationship, but as long as he fulfills my attachment, then I am prepared, of course I am, to want him to be happy. I want him to be happy, and I don't want him to suffer, and it's easy to do that, and it's real, but it's contingent. Because as long as attachment's there, and as soon as attachment goes, as soon as he leaves me for someone else, let's say, my love and compassion turn off like a tap. Why? Because he doesn't deserve it. What does that mean? That means that we only love and have compassion for those who make me happy and do what I want. So it's totally self-based. It's utterly I-based. We should be embarrassed to even admit it, but we think it's normal. So for enemies, we might use that word, but it's a good word for an object of aversion. You might have people you really hate, but everybody's got people that just don't like much, irritate you, annoy you at work. They're called enemies for this framework. You have aversion for them. So you don't necessarily want to be happy, And even if they've really been mean to you, you actually actively don't want them to be happy, and you do want them to suffer. That's very common in the world. Look at the world. So what's a stranger? 99.9999% of this universe. And who are they? They're ones who've neither harmed us nor helped us. How do we feel about them? We couldn't care less. They could all drop dead. And that's a fact. I mean, we just think it's normal. It's normal in terms of samsara. It's normal because we've all got the three toxic emotions. Because we've got ego, grasping, attachment, and aversion. Join the universe here. It's the way all the universe is. This is Buddha's analysis, you know. So it's kind of shocking what he's saying. He's so radical in what he says we can accomplish. It's exhausting to think about having to love and have compassion for everybody. So right now the logic of ego, of love and compassion is because they make me happy. But here we're trying to shift it to be the basis for wanting others to be happy. It's because guess what, baby? Because they want to be happy. That becomes the basis. That's what we're doing right at the equanimity level, at the root. This is the root, the basis, the foundation of growing these others that culminate in bodhicitta. So it's already shocking. So equanimity isn't love and compassion yet. That comes with the 6 points on. This is the basis. We've got to hear this logically. Understand how logically enemy, friend and stranger are labels that our ego puts on top of people, have no valid basis. Yes, some people harm me, and yes, some people help me, and yes, some people do neither. But that's not the logic here. That's the logic of ego. Got nothing to do with it. What we're trying to prove in equanimity is that from their point of view, in their shoes, from their point of view, they are equally wish to be happy and equally wish to suffer. Which means that enemy, friend and stranger are complete constructs put by our mind on these three people. And you've got to use logical arguments to prove this to ourselves. So we have some kind of confidence that enemy, friend and stranger, from their point of view, are equal from one point of view. They wish to be happy. They wish not to suffer. That's the basis for wanting them to be happy and wanting them not to suffer. Love and compassion. So until we have this, it's always going to be unstable. You know? This is already powerful. Already powerful. So we could go into that now, or we could leave it tomorrow. What do you think? Huh? Tomorrow? Enough today? I mean, I shout louder than most people and talk double the pace. Triple, actually. I always say this, and I'm sorry if you're bored by it, but I've told people many times. But years ago in Queensland, our Chen raising nuns, we have a nunnery, and the woman in Brisbane invited us down to give talks on Tuesdays, 3 of us nuns. And then she transcribed them, and they were all 90 minutes. And the other 2 nuns took 8 pages and mine were 24. So it's about midnight by now, okay? So you've had enough. So I think we leave it in questions and everything till tomorrow, okay? What do you think? Then we'll go into detail on the compassion wing and we'll talk about emptiness as well. No more questions. Okay? Is that all right? So we dedicate and think how fantastic we've been together. That's 4 hours of non-stop thinking as well as lunchtime. That's 6 hours. Wow, amazing. All these seeds we planted, not going to go astray, so we nourish them from this second forward. How delightful. We rejoice in our progress, to rejoice for each other, and may we nourish these seeds as much as we can with our practice and never give up on ourselves or others. Jangchub, Semchub, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyampa Me Payang, Gong Ne Gondu Kaba Shob, Gewa Di, Nudu Jag Nama Sangye Drubgyo Ne, Droa Chikyang Marupa, De Sarab Gurpa Shob. Thank you, boy. Thank you.